Hello, my name is Alice. So, I'm a huge nerd or geek or what have you, and I definitely have had my hyperfixations. Now, usually they last for a year or so, and then I either divide my attention between media and fandoms or jump into a new one. But Moomin is very different. I definitely had my Moomin phase back in 2020 to 2021 when everyone else did, but it didn't stop there. My interest did fade a little, but my interest for Moomin never went away. It might be because it's more of a cultural phenomenon in Sweden where I live, or that it's extremely commercialized, but it's still such a huge part of my life. I have like a big Moomin merch collection. I've read all the books front to back and I yap about it constantly. I'm basically known for loving Moomin and my family. I'm like the gay loser Moomin obsessed cousin. Now, back in 2021 when the fandom was booming, I made a series of videos on TikTok talking about fun Moomin facts that kind of informed people that the Moomin franchise in fact had much more lore and stuff than one would think. These videos became semi-popular and I left it at that. Some while ago, while I was thinking of videos to make, however, I remembered those old videos. There was one comment in particular that I remember from back then that I still think about to this day, and it's just, there's Moomin lore, and I just thought it was such a funny comment, and it perfectly reflects the way I myself felt about the Moomin franchise as the fandom grew and my interest was sparked. So here I am, 4 to 5 years later. I thought I would put my obsession and knowledge to good use and compile a giant video full of Moomin facts and lore. This video will be long. I haven't put all the pieces together yet, so I don't know exactly how long as I'm recording this, but I would guess at least like 2 to 3 hours. So yeah, we have a lot of content to go over. So this is a great video to listen to while doing a task, a chore, while traveling, eating, drawing, or just while chilling on the couch. I will put some visuals like pictures from the books, series, and games, as well as some shorter speed paints of mine, because you know, this is an art-focused channel after all. But if you just want to listen, that is completely fine. You won't miss out on any information if you don't watch. Anyway, here is what's on the agenda. The first point we're going to talk about is the author, Tove Jansson. The second is characters and relations. The third is books. And this section is the hugest. The next one is comic. The next one is other media like TV shows and movies. The next one is fandom and shipping. And lastly, the ending and summary. This video will, again, put a lot of weight on the original book series by Tove Jansson, since a lot of the storylines used in various TV series and movies stem from them. So I would say at least like 60 to 80% of this video is just going to be me going through the novels, because they're very packed with information. And again, the other like TV iterations, merch, everything is based on these books. So this is the very core of the Moomin lore. So this video is perfect if you haven't read the books but want to know what happens in them, or if you read them a while ago and you want your memory refreshed, or if you're new to Moomin altogether. Now, before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to all my sources, but especially the Moomin.com blog. Most of my research is from there, and if you want to know more, I strongly advise you to visit. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump right in. So, the author and creator of the Moomin franchise is Tove Jansson. She was born in 1914 in Helsinki, Finland. Her parents were Victor Jansson, a Finland Swede, and Signe Hammarsten Jansson, a Swede. Her father was a sculptor and her mother was an illustrator who designed Finnish stamps. She had 2 younger brothers, Per-Olof and Lars, both of whom were artists. So she really grew up with art all around her and was born into a family of artists. During her childhood, she spent a lot of time in Sweden since the family had a vacation home in Stockholm's archipelago. Now she studied at Brobergska Samskolan, a Swedish-speaking school in Helsinki. She went on to study different art forms at Stockholm's University in 1930 and then went back to Finland to study at the Academy of Fine Arts in Helsinki in 1933. And she also went on to study in France later in life. Tove Jansson was a queer woman. She had relationships with both women and men. And there are 3 main love relations in Tove's life that we will be focusing on because they would eventually come to inspire characters within the Moomin world. But we'll get into that later. The first love interest that we'll be talking about is Aatos Virtanen. He was a politically active author who started dating Tove in 1943. He had a lot of connections in the Swedish-Finnish creative sphere and would host parties that Tove gladly attended. Tove described him as full of life, thoughts, and utopias. She felt that she could freely love and create while together with him. Now, the second love interest that we'll be talking about is Vivica Bandler. She was a theater director and scriptwriter. Now, I'll be reading you a letter that Tove sent to a friend, but keep in mind, I have translated this one on my own. Now, I would consider myself fluent in both Swedish and English. However, some things just don't translate well between languages, so keep that in mind that this is my translation of the letter. Someone else might translate it differently. Anyway, here's the letter. Dear Eva, something has happened that I understand I must tell you. I am so happy and so glad and so free. You know that I feel like Aatos' wife, and I probably always will, but now this has happened to me, that I fell in love recklessly with a woman, and it appears so absolutely natural and true. There are no problems whatsoever. I only feel proud and rampantly happy. Now, Tove wanted the relationship to be public. She was not ashamed of being queer at all. But Vivica wanted to keep it a secret because of the stigma at the time and because she was married. Now, homosexuality was still seen as a disease in Finland at the time and wouldn't be decriminalized until 1971. Because of this, they broke up after a few weeks. Vivica did not want to risk her marriage, and she had other lovers, which hurt Tove deeply. However, they remained friends, and Vivica went on to work with her on several Moomin plays and other musical projects. Now, the third relationship that we're going to go over was Tove's relationship with Tuulikki. She has a surname, but I'm not Finnish, and I don't want to butcher it, so I'll just put her full name on screen. Now, Tuulikki was another fellow artist. The two met at a Christmas party in 1955. They traveled the world together and made several collaborative art projects, some of them being related to the Moomins. For example, a miniature of the Moomin house. Their relationship was revolutionary, both in the art world but also in queer history. They were openly together since the 50s, despite homosexuality being illegal until 1971. For example, they were the first same-sex couple to attend the Independence Day reception at the President's Palace in Finland in 1992. They were both each other's true love and bought a tiny secluded island together. Now, it's another name I'm gonna butcher, but it was called Klovharun. But it's definitely not pronounced like that. It's located in Pellinge archipelago in Finland. and that is where they would spend their summers. They spent nearly 50 years together until Tove's death in 2001. Now, Tove made other art projects besides Moomin, both before and after. She was an oil painter, often painting self-portraits through various stages in her life, as well as landscapes from both her home and travels. Examples of some of her oil paintings are Rökande flicka, Park, Hamnvi, Paris, Självporträtt med korgstol, Båtar i Pellinge, and other works. Now, some of the most notable paintings and works she has done besides Moomin is Familjen, which is a painting that depicts Tove in black with both her parents and her younger brothers. The painting was made in 1942 and depicts Tove's family and their struggles with the Second World War. There's different political opinions that divide the family, and the oldest of her brothers is going to war. There are lots of hidden meanings and details in this painting that I won't get into in this video, but it's definitely worth checking out if you're interested. Now, the next painting we're going to be talking about is the painting Fest, Party. Now, this one is actually a mural, and it's interesting because it stars some Easter eggs from Tove's life at the time. For example, it stars Vivica, who is dancing with a man, and it stars Moomin himself on the table where Tove is sitting. Now, interestingly enough, this mural was actually made at the request of Vivica's father, and it was painted for the town hall's basement restaurant. Now, the third work she has done that is so fun, in my opinion, and just very interesting is she actually illustrated the Swedish copy of The Hobbit. Now, I love this so much because, well, her illustrations are really cute, but also because she was actually requested to do this by the Swedish author Astrid Lindgren, which is one of my favorite authors and one of my childhood idols. Now, Astrid's most favorite work of fiction is Pippi Longstocking. Now, she was a publishing editor at the publishing company Raben and Sjögren at the time, which is basically how Tove got the job. So, I feel like talking a little bit about characters and relations. Now, most people watching this video most likely know at least a little bit about Moomin and therefore know about some of the characters. But I'd like to go over the main cast and some side characters that have a bigger role in the series, just in case you don't know all of them or just want to maybe learn more about them or something. So anyway, let's start with the main cast. Now, unsurprisingly, Moomintroll, or Moomin, is the main character and is described as kind, caring, and curious. He often struggles with maturing and often feels as if everyone treats him as a child, whereas he wants to be treated as an adult. He wants to be treated seriously. But at the end of the day, he is a child, and this is obviously a thing that a lot of children struggle with. They want to be perceived as mature, even though they're not. Moomin likes things to be as they are, and tends to be upset when things change suddenly. Personally, this hits a little too close to home for me. Moomin is also kind of restless. He needs things to happen, but they have to kind of happen his way. Again, this is something that is very common in children, but obviously stubbornness is something that is present in adults as well. Now, Moomin is confirmed to be kind of an alter ego for Tove. As you'll see throughout this video, the Moomin world is packed with personal things from Tove's life. From everything to characters being inspired by people in her life, to events in the Moomin franchise relating to events in her own life. There's a lot of her in the Moomin universe. But moving on, the next character we're going to talk about is Moominmappa. Moominmappa is Moomin's mother. She is kind, nurturing, and great at making anyone and everyone feel welcome. She runs the household in a quiet and almost unnoticeable manner, making her the head of the house, in my opinion. This is, some people might argue with me on this, but in my opinion, she's definitely the head of the house, like making major decisions about what is going to happen with the household and what the family is supposed to do and stuff like that. Although she's not as loud and insistent as Moominpappa is. So, I don't know. To me, she's always come off as this, like, you know, authoritative figure, but she doesn't, like, force her authority upon anyone. Everyone just respects her because she's a nice person and her opinions are important to people. Anyway, enough rambling. She is based on Tove's own mother, and one of her biggest interests is her garden. And she's never seen without her handbag that can fit literally anything inside, which I believe is a pretty common mom trope. As opposed to Moomin, she doesn't find it as hard to handle change unless the change involves something she doesn't like. So, for example, later in the series, we'll see a major shift in the Moomin family's living situation, and Moominmappa has a hard time handling this because she misses Moominvalley and she misses her garden that is very important to her. So that's a change that she has a hard time kind of dealing with. But she does not have the same struggle that Moomin has with handling smaller changes that maybe doesn't affect everything as majorly, if that makes sense. Now, I have a quote that kind of cements this character trait of hers. It's from the book Moominsummer Madness, and this is the quote. "There's a lot of things one can't understand," Moominmappa said to herself. "But why should everything be exactly as one is used to having it?" Now, Moominpappa is, like Moominmappa, inspired by Tove's own dad. He is the father of Moomin, and he has very high confidence and a lot of pride that easily falters. So although he has a lot of confidence, it's pretty easy to, like, knock him off his pedestal. He cares quite a lot about how other people perceive him. And so when they don't agree with him or don't agree with the way he perceives himself, he can get very defensive. He is a thinker, a talented storyteller, and according to himself, a fearless traveler. He tends to over-exaggerate and sometimes even lie when telling his stories, which is why I take the book The Exploits of Moominpappa with a grain of salt. Basically, in this book, he writes a memoir about his early life and tells the story of the other dads in Moominvalley that are mysteriously not there most of the time. We'll get more into that later as I go over that book. But anyway, his storytelling is questionable at best. He's a very restless character, and so he needs constant activity, which kind of lines up with how Moomin is. He needs, like, play and have activities going pretty much all the time. Now, we're gonna talk about Little Mai. She is my absolute favorite character, and I have a very personal connection to her. She is very small. In fact, the book makes a joke out of it and claims that she was basically born microscopic. She's definitely a chaotic evil on the personality scale. She, like, constantly bites and disses people, even if she likes them. Now, she is one of many siblings, and her father is unknown. She enters the Moomin books pretty late. Her mother basically forgets her at the Moomin house after she visits, because, you know, she has a lot of kids to keep track of. Hello, this is a slight add-on or edit. Apparently, Little Mai wasn't left at the Moomin house or forgotten by her mother at the Moomin house. In the books, she was actually just left there by her sister, who didn't want to care for her anymore, but she was left and forgotten by her mother in the comics, so yeah. And basically, Little Mai just moves in. Now, despite being a bit of a menace, she is very loyal to her friends and very protective of those she loves, even though she constantly, again, bites them and disses them. But yeah, again, I love her. I recently got a tattoo of her, and I know my mom and dad used to call me Little Mai before I was born. So she's just kind of always been a name in our household that is very precious to us. The next character we'll be talking about is Snufkin. He is described as a philosopher and a wanderer on the Moomin website. He enjoys the simple things in life, like walking, hiking, fishing, and spending time with friends, especially his best friend, Moomin. Now, interestingly enough, he is Little Mai's little brother, half-brother actually. They share the same mother. And I don't know, I just find it funny that he's her younger brother since she's so small. But anyway, he plays the harmonica and makes a new spring song each spring. Each winter, he goes away on a long hike while the Moomins hibernate to recover from social life and to charge his batteries. He's like basically the biggest introvert there ever was. But after each hike, he comes back in spring to Moominvalley, and Moomin is always waiting on him. Now, Snufkin is based on Tove's ex, Athos, who was also a philosopher that liked independence and adventure. I talked about him briefly during the Tove section of the video. The next character is Snork Maiden. Now, she's a snork, which is another breed than Moomins, but it's very similar. Basically, the only differences between the snorks and the Moomins are that snorks have bangs or tufts of hair that grows between their ears, and in the first book, they actually change color depending on their mood. But this isn't really used in any of the cinematic adaptations, so I don't know if it's canon or not. It varies in different versions, but it's cool nonetheless. She is very imaginative and stubborn, and she knows what she wants, and she's gonna get it, basically. She's also very resourceful and quick thinking, which often comes in handy during the adventures she goes on with Moomin and friends. She's shown through many iterations to be a sort of love interest for Moomin, although this also varies in seriousness through different iterations. I think mostly because they're children, so you know, when you have like a boyfriend or girlfriend in like first or second grade and it's kind of an on-off thing, and you're like friends but you're together but you're friends, you know, at least that's like my interpretation of the relationship. It's like two children having a crush on each other, you know, but they're very cute nonetheless. Now for the last like main character-ish, we have Sniff. Now, Sniff is very nervous, scared, and greedy. Like his father, he is a collector, hoarder, and a material girl, very much. He's also very gluttonous and eats everything he can get his hands on, pretty much. Like Little Mai, he was adopted by the Moomin family at a young age due to his parents, quote-unquote, losing him. Although, like, girl, I'm not so sure. I feel like a lot of parents are just not raising their children and just kind of passing them on to the Moomin family and like coming up with different excuses and stuff. It's like kinda fucked up. I don't know. Anyway, Sniff is very easy to offend or upset. He's like really sensitive. And also, this isn't important to his character, but in the books, he keeps throwing up all the time, and I don't know why. I'm sorry that, like, my, like, review of Sniff or whatever isn't as serious as the other characters. It's just, he's such a goofy little guy. I don't... Anyway, that brings us to the side characters. So, the first side character that I'm going to talk about is Snork. Or the Snork, I don't really know what he's called in English, but He is Snork Maiden's brother. He is very smart and an inventor. Now, what he builds and what he does kind of differs from the books to like the 90s anime and stuff. But in some versions, he built various machines for different purposes. And he's often asked for help by the other citizens of Moominvalley. Now, the most famous contraption he has created is the bizarre flying contraption. He is very precise, which gives others the impression that he's a bit of a know-it-all. Because of the fact that many of his personality traits, like specific interests, repetitive behaviors, and difficulty with social interaction, fit into the autism spectrum, many people headcanon him as autistic. Now, keeping in mind that he was written in the 1940s, which was a time when not much was known about autism and neurodiversity in general, we can't know if that was Tove's intention. However, I think the headcanon fits the character very well, and I share it. I mean, I also headcanon him as autistic, or at least that he has some form of neurodiversity. Now, looking at the newer series, Moominvalley, which we will get back to, it basically confirms him as being autistic, which I think is amazing. It makes me so happy that autistic people can finally see themselves or some of their traits in a character, and that we're finally seeing some more representation for different kinds of people, because it's very needed. And this is definitely off topic, but I think we can all agree, like, in this political climate and everything that is happening in the world, more representation is always a good thing, as long as it's good representation, of course, which I think the Snork is. Anyway, moving on to Tutiki. Now, Tutiki is a character that lives in the old bathing house by the sea during the winter. She takes care of animals that are seeking shelter, warmth, and food. She is inspired by Tove's life partner Tuliki, which, again, I won't say the surname of because I'll not be able to pronounce it. But she loves the cold and is very in touch with nature and other living beings. She's also very respectful of their wants and needs, which I think is nice to see. She tends to mend and take care of things. For example, Nini the invisible child, who she hands over to the Moomins in the end. She likes music and is described to be singing several times, as well as playing the barrel organ and the flute. The next character is Stinky. I love his name. It suits him. He is a small villainous creature. And quoting the Moomin site here, he is a villain and proud of it. He's a thief and a liar and only cares about himself. It just sounds like I'm roasting someone. He's only out for personal gain and personal gain only. The Moomin family is on somewhat good terms with him though. Moomin Mama in particular has a soft spot for him, as she tends to see the good in everyone, and I suppose that Stinky has his own way of showing affection, especially in the 2019 iteration Moominvalley. Now we're going to move on to Filionks. Now, there is a character called the Filionk, or Miss Filionk, I think, that is more prominent than other Filionks, but I'm going to talk about the Filionks like as a race or species, because there are several. Now, again, there are race or species like the Moomins and the Snorks, the Mimbles, and more. They share characteristics with each other like other species, and are generally characterized by their love for organization, routine, and discipline. They tend to become panicked if things go wrong or they don't go their way. And as I said, the most well-known Filionk is Mrs. Filionk. There we go. She is strict, a perfectionist, and is constantly stressed, except for when she's cleaning. She's personally not my favorite, but I think she's an interesting character nonetheless. The next character is the Muskrat. He is a pessimistic philosopher who lives in the hammock outside the Moomin house, since his home was destroyed when Moominpappa built a bridge over the river. He loves to rant about how useless everything is, and whatever happens, it won't matter because nothing does in the end, like classic philosopher stuff. He's very deep and very simple at the same time. He tends to kind of go against his own sayings, however, since he himself has things that he cares about. For example, his dignity and the way people view him is very important to him. The family calls him uncle on occasion, which suggests he might be older than some of the other characters. Now we've reached two characters called Thingamy and Bob. They are two very shy creatures who have their own language that only they speak. They are very private and close to each other, almost like two halves of a whole. They have a habit of stealing, but they mean no harm by it. They're attracted to things they find beautiful, I guess. They speak in this peculiar way, as mentioned. Now, it's different in the Swedish-Finnish version and the English version how they speak. In the original Swedish-Finnish version, they add slan at the end of every word. So, for example, sked, that means spoon in Swedish, would become skedslan. In the English version, Thingamy and Bob instead switches around letters. For example, what a pity becomes potta witty. And here is kind of a personal rant, so I'm sorry. You can skip it if you want to. But as a Swede, I'm kind of pissed about their English names. Up until now, I haven't really discussed changes in names between languages because it hasn't really mattered. But I think it does here, actually. Thingamy and Bob are based on Tove Jansson herself and her ex-girlfriend Vivica that I mentioned earlier. Now, Tove and Vivica had nicknames for each other, Tofslan and Vifslan, basically a short version of their names with a slan added at the end. This is why they speak that way in the Swedish-Finnish version, and why I'm low-key a bit angry about their names. I understand the change in their speech, that slan isn't a sound that would work well in the English language, but I just think the choices for their names in English are so weird. Thingamy and Bob? Where did they get that? Bob? Hello? I'm sorry for ranting, but I don't know. I couldn't find why they were called this in English or who named them that, but even if Tove herself decided to name them that, I still don't like it. I'm not gonna lie. But that's just my opinion. Let's move on. The next characters we're gonna talk about are the Hemulans. Now, it's the same thing here. There is a particular Hemul that is usually present in the Moomin story, but there are several Hemulans or Hemuls, so I'm gonna talk about them as a species rather than focusing on one character. Now, they look quite a lot like Moomins and Snorks with their big snouts, but they tend to be taller and bigger. Like the Filijonks, they believe in order, duty, and rules. They like collecting things and can be a bit bossy and sometimes even strict, and sometimes mean. Notable Hemulans in the Moomin universe is the keeper of the orphanage where Moominpappa was brought up, the park keeper who is Snufkin's mortal enemy, and the Hemulan often showed in the 90s Moomin anime who collects bugs, flowers, and stamps. Now we're going to talk a little bit about family trees and relations, as well as some facts about the characters and stuff. I don't know, this is kind of an odd section where I just put some stuff that I didn't know where else to put. Now, we'll start with little Mai. She is a Mimble, which is also a sort of breed or race in the Moomin universe. Her mother is the Mimble, a big woman with a lot of children, as mentioned, and her father is unknown. Now, the Mimble is not a very caring mother. She often forgets her children and seems to create new ones without a care, which is kind of a common theme in Moominvalley for whatever reason. Now, the most notable child of her children, except for Little Mai and Snufkin, is Mimble, which is Little Mai's older sister, who visits sometimes to check up on her. Now, I want to talk about something a little funny, and that is the origin of the name Mimble, or in Finnish, Swedish, Mimla. Now, it is thought to be a reference to the Finnish expression that was used in Tove's circles during this time, at mimla, or to mimble. Now, this expression was used in reference to having sex. It is thought that Mimble, mother of Snufkin, Little Mai, and countless other children, was most likely named this because of her many children, which means she most likely mimbles a lot. And I had no idea this was a thing. I actually found this while researching this video, and I thought it was really funny, so I just kind of had to put it in. Anyway, Snufkin is Little Mai's younger brother. In Moominpappa's memoirs, or The Exploits of Moominpappa, as the book is called in English, it is described how the Jockster, Snufkin's dad, met Mimble. Jockster shares similarities with his son. He also likes to live astray and out in nature and on his own. However, Jockster is described as lazy and tired, which I don't experience that Snufkin is. When it comes to Moomin himself, his family tree is rather simple. There's Moomin Mama and Moominpappa and their son Moomin. At first glance, they're a very nuclear, traditional family, I guess, compared to everyone else anyway. However, they're very welcoming and easily invites guests into their house and newfound members into their family, like Little Mai, Snufkin, and Sniff. So they keep adding children. I think it's kind of heartwarming. It's like the Moomin family kind of takes in all the stray children that have just been left out in the world. And speaking of which, Sniff's family, it consists of his mother, the Fuzzy, and his dad, the Muddler. Now, again, his parents allegedly lost him at an early age, and so he was adopted by the Moomin family. He has a brother, the Fuddler, who only appears in the Moomin comics and who looks a lot like the Muddler. And a fun fact, the Muddler, Sniff's father, appeared in the 90s Moomin anime, but was mistakenly named Fuddler due to their similarity in appearance. Now, this brings us to the largest portion of this video, no doubt. I decided to summarize the plot of each book pretty thoroughly, and that might seem a bit insane, and why did I put down so much work and stuff, but I did it because I feel like the Moomin books are the core of all Moomin media. It's what everything is based off of. It's kind of just the core of everything that Moomin is, and the canon and everything. So, I'm basically going to be reading the plots of these books almost as if I'm reading you an audiobook. So if you want to listen to that, then stick around, and if you don't want to listen to that, then you can move on to the next section of the video. Now, without further ado, here is the order in which the book series was written. First, it was the Moomins and the Great Flood in 1945. Then it was Comet in Moominland in 1946. Finn Family Moomintroll, The Wizard's Hat in Swedish version, 1948. The Exploits of Moominpappa, originally written in 1950 but reworked in 1968. Moominsummer Madness in 1954. Moominland Midwinter in 1958. Tales from Moominvalley, or The Invisible Child in Swedish, 1962. Moominpappa at Sea, 1965. And Moominvalley in November 1966. Now, keep in mind that Tove wrote other books outside of this series in between and after these books, such as the book about Moomin, Mimble, and Little Mai, or Who Will Comfort Toffel, or The Dangerous Journey. There are also several children's books written afterwards, both by Tove and other authors, but I will focus on the book series because its content is the main inspiration for most plays, series, and movies, etc. Now, again, I will break down the basic plot in each book and offer some of my opinions on them along the way, so strap in, this is gonna take a while. Now, the first book in the Moomin series is The Moomins and the Great Flood. I think it's a very interesting book, as it serves more as a pilot for the books to come rather than a canon start of the series. Some details differ from later books, which in my opinion makes at least parts of this book non-canon. Since it was written in 1945 during the Second World War, which changed Finland drastically, as it did with lots of other countries, it has a lot of war themes and is very much a reflection of Tove's life during that time. Now, some context, some history. Finland fought alone against the Soviet Union, which resulted in the Winter War, which hit the country very hard. This obviously had a big impact on Finnish people's lives, and thereby Tove's life. The book is quite short and starts with a personalized message from Tove, which I've translated into English. Now keep in mind, again, I translated this myself, so there may be some errors or some differences in opinion on whether it's translated in the right way, but I did my best. It was the war winter of 1939. Work had ceased. It felt completely unnecessary to try and create pictures. Maybe it was understandable that I all of a sudden got an urge to write something down that started with "Once upon a time." The continuation has to be a fairy tale. That is unavoidable. But I excused myself by avoiding princesses, and small children, and chose instead my angry signature character from the comedy illustrations and called him Moomintroll. The half-finished story lay forgotten until 1945. Then, a friend told me that this could become a children's book. Finish writing it and illustrate it, and they might run with it. I had thought that the title would have something to do with the Moomintroll, his searching for his father, modeled after Captain Grant's children, but the publisher wanted Småtrollen to make it easier for the readers to understand. The story is pretty influenced by the childhood books I read and loved, like Jules Verne, a little bit of Collodi, the girl with the blue hair, and so on. But why not? Anyway, here is my very first happy end. Tove Jansson. Now, a small FYI about this, Småtrollen is the original Swedish title for the book, and it translates to the small trolls. Now, the story of this book starts with Moomin and Moomin Mama walking through a big forest, searching for a place to live before the winter comes. They encounter various interesting places and creatures, for example Sniff, who's simply called the small creature in this book, a giant snake, a beautiful lady called Tulippa with blue hair, and an old man with a big hat. Summarized, they go through several trials in the forest. In this pilot version of the story, the Moomintrolls are very small and live together with the house trolls, Hattefatteners, and humans in human houses. The Moomintrolls lived behind the fireplaces of humans for warmth and protection, but has to flee as less and less people use fireplaces to heat their houses. It is implied that Moomintroll has never met his father in this version of the story. Moomin Mama describes how they moved around from fireplace to fireplace, but he was never satisfied. In the end, she says he left with the Hattefatteners. She seems to believe she'll never see him again, and cries at the thought of him. As the adventure continues, the Moomins, Tulippa, and Sniff go out to sea and get stuck in a storm, where Sniff gets seasick and they meet mermaids. At last they find shore, and meets a boy who falls in love with Tulipa, who provides them with shelter and food. Tulipa stays with him as the Moomins and Sniff leave. They rescue a cat mom and her kittens and continues their journey on water since the environment is flooded due to the storm. They find a message in a bottle from Moomin's dad, stating that he's stranded in a tree due to the storm. Moomin Mama gets worried. They leave on a big marabou bird to find Moominpappa, and finally find him sitting in a tree with an SOS sign. The family reunites and moves into a house that Moominpappa has built, the Moomin house that is seen in the rest of the series. Now, interesting to note is that throughout this journey, we are introduced to the Hattifatteners, as well as mentions of other characters to come, like the Hemulans and Snuffkins, which are spoken of as a species kind of like Mimbles and Hemulans. Now, the Hattifatteners specifically are tiny white creatures who will appear in later books, and we get to learn the early concept of the Moomintroll's backstory. We also learn about the Moomin family's backstories, which aren't canon later in the series. It is instead repurposed as a story belonging to their ancestors. Now, for my personal thoughts, the themes of war are very obvious despite barely being mentioned in the actual books. It is instead told through the act of fleeing, of families being split apart, and the fear of not finding shelter before winter. Considering this was written during the war-ridden Finnish winter of 1939, these themes are very fitting and are most likely things Tove saw and experienced firsthand during that period of time. Though the book can't be referenced to for canon lore, it is obvious that a lot of the original plans and concepts were either used or reused, and that the tone and humor remains the same throughout the other books. One thing I love with this book is the early designs for the Moomins. They're significantly less cute and squishy looking as we are used to in more modern adaptations like the 90s anime or in the 2019 3D animated series. Instead, their snouts are portrayed more like noses, which gives them an almost ugly appearance. This is, if I were to guess, definitely based on Nordic and European folklore, where trolls are often portrayed with disproportionately huge noses and big bellies. I suppose Tove might have changed it to give the characters more distinct looks and to kind of differentiate them from classic trolls, but I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, the next book we're going to look at is Comet in Moominland. Again, the first book was pretty short, so all the rest of these books are going to take a bit longer to get through. It starts with Moominpappa finishing the bridge over the river in Moominvalley. Sniff gets his name, and him and Moomin go on an adventure through the forest. Moomin finds some pearls in the sea, and Sniff finds a cat by the shore that leads him to a cave. They get home and tell Moomin Mama about their adventure. It starts raining heavily into the night, and this is when we are introduced to the muskrat. The muskrat wants to be let in and explains to Moominpappa that his house is destroyed because of the bridge. Moominpappa lets him in. The next day is gray, and the muskrat plants himself in the family's hammock. The muskrat scares Moomin and Sniff with stories of a natural disaster and explains space to the family and how small the earth is compared to everything, which basically gives Moomin and Sniff an existential crisis. Because of this, Moominpappa sends the kids away to an observatorium so that they can see space for themselves. Moomin Mama packs them a bunch of stuff, and they leave on a raft on the river. In the distance, on the water, they see Hattifatteners, and they're like these little white, small travelers. After a while, they happen upon a yellow tent, and we're introduced to Snuffkin, who is described to be wearing a green hat and smoking a pipe. They get to know each other, and Snuffkin decides to join their adventure. They encounter dangers like a giant lizard and has to walk on stilts over ravines and float on rafts through dangerous waters. Snuffkin plays his harmonica on the way and tells stories of a mountain that spits fire and a fire spirit he met. They meet a mule on the way up the mountain who helps them out of a hole. Snufkin tells Moomin of 2 Snorks he met, which turns out to be Snork and Snork Maiden. Snufkin is surprised that Moomin doesn't know what or who they are, since they are so alike. He describes them as almost exactly as Moomin, except they change color based on emotion. They continue climbing up the mountain and finds a gold ring in a hole in the mountain that Snufkin confirms belongs to Snork Maiden. They all assume that she fell down and died, and they all get sad. Finally, they reach the observatory located above the clouds, where they meet a bunch of stressed out smoking scientists. A professor shows them that a comet is on its way towards Moominvalley and tells them it will hit the ground in 4 days. The gang goes searching for Snork and Snork Maiden to return Snork Maiden's ring. They make their way down the mountain again and has to get rid of their things when they get too heavy. At last, they meet the Snork, who calls for help since an evil bush is eating his sister. She is terrified and described as Violet due to fear. Moomin cusses at the bush and defeats it very dramatically, which, to me, it's a super cute scene, not gonna lie. Moomin gives Snork Maiden her foot ring and she turns yellow from happiness. They decide on a plan to hide in Sniff's cave when the comet comes. They find an old shop with a lady in it, and Snufkin tries to buy new pants since his are broken, but he panics because they look too new and refuses to buy them. Moomin buys Snork Maiden a mirror, and she buys him a medal that is a Christmas star, the one you put on the Christmas tree, on a thread. They find a dance floor in the forest and have a dance break. The day after, they reach what once was the ocean, but is now a desert since the water has moved due to the comet. They walk through it on stilts. They find a boat wreck with treasures and an octopus inside, and spend the night on a rock. In the morning, they meet a bunch of fleeing creatures, but no Moominmamma or Moominpappa, which worries Moomin. They meet a mule who joins them on their way back to Moominvalley to hide himself and his stamp collection in the cave. They keep running into problems, like there's a swarm of grasshoppers that starts eating the forests, and then there's very strong winds. The mule loses his stamp collection, and the gang is able to use his dress to fly with in the wind. In the Moomin house, Moominmamma and Moominpappa is waiting for their children to return. Moominmamma is making a croquembouche with the words "For my beloved Moomin" on it. Finally, they reach home, and Moominmamma and Moominpappa are very relieved. They are introduced to all of Moomin and Sniff's new friends. After introductions have been made, they start packing and heading to the cave. Sniff also goes through the canon event of finding the cat from the beginning of the book again, and the cat just completely ignoring him. They set things up in the cave and gets ready for the comet, but Sniff discovers that the croquembouche only has Moomin's name on it and gets very upset and runs out of the cave. Moomin runs after him despite the comet being really close, and they manage to just make it back in time. The comet hits and it's terrifying. Everything is shaking and loud. And then there's just silence. After a while, Moominmamma sings a lullaby to calm the kids into sleep. At the end of the day, the ocean returns and everything goes back to normal. Personally, I think this book is a really strong start of the series, as it introduces many of the key characters and the world they live in, including the valley, the forest, the mountains, and the ocean. I am completely in love with all the illustrations of the Moomin books, and I think Moomin immediately taking a liking to Snork Maiden and Snufkin is just super cute. I think it's a great introduction for what's to come. Now, the next book is Finn Family Moomintroll, or The Wizard's Hat, as it's called in Swedish. Now, again, I'm gonna have to say that it's long. And I know I said that last book too, but this one is gonna be even longer to go through. Not because it's that much longer in terms of pages compared to the previous one. It's just there's a lot of like very relevant stuff that happens in it that I feel like I kind of have to bring up, at least briefly. So yeah. In the beginning of the book, there is a map over Moominvalley. I'll put it on screen. I think it's really interesting to kind of see where everything is located. So if you want to look at it, pause and take a look. This book is also divided into chapters, which is new for the series. In the prologue, the snow has come in and the Moomin family is getting ready to hibernate, as they always do during the winter. They eat fir needles, as is custom for hibernating Moomintrolls. In the first chapter, Moomin wakes up in the spring and realizes that Snufkin, who shares a room with him, is gone. He finds him outside on the bridge, where they sit side by side while Snufkin plays his harmonica. They wake Sniff, who comes down to be with them. Together they walk around the valley, greeting the other creatures who have just woken up. They find a mysterious hat up on a hill. They get back to the house where the rest of the family has woken up and show the hat to Moominpappa. The hat is too big for Moominpappa, and so they decide to use it as a trash can, naturally. They throw eggshells in the trash can hat, and they mysteriously turn into 5 clouds that rises out of the hat. The children play with the clouds, sitting on them and floating around on them outside. Moomintroll and Snork Maiden go off on their own. On their way, they find the Hamule, who is depressed because he has finished his stamp collection and doesn't know what to do with his life. At home, they meet the Hamule once again, who is now happy. He has discovered that he will occupy himself with botany. In the second chapter, the children are playing hide and seek. Moomin decides to hide in the hat/trash can, but since it's a magical hat, it changes his appearance drastically, and nobody recognizes him. Moomin starts to panic, but Moomin Mama recognizes him after looking into his eyes and comforts him. I personally feel it is up to interpretation whether she actually recognizes her kid or not, and it's supposed to be like this, a mother always recognizes her child kind of thing, or if she's just trying to comfort this creature who clearly believes he is the Moomintroll. I think either interpretation is very cute. Either way, Moomin turns into himself again after being recognized. In the afternoon, Moomin and the Snork is discussing amongst themselves who or what could have turned Moomin. They think it's the hat, but they want to test it out on someone they don't like, so they choose the antlion, a creature that was first introduced in the first book, The Moomins and the Great Flood. They trick him into a jar and bring him to the Moomin house to show the other kids. They throw the antlion into the hat, and he transforms into a hedgehog. Moomin Mama and Moominpappa is informed of the hat's powers and agree that it should be destroyed for everyone's safety. At night, Moomin waits for Snufkin in the window of their room. Snufkin calls him from below the house and asks him if he can keep a secret. The secret is that Snufkin has found the hat washed ashore in the forest, and the pair make their way there. It is described how Snufkin can see better in the dark because he has night eyes that Moomin doesn't have. The hat is turning the water red, so Moomin swims out and grabs it. They hide it in Sniff's cave. In Chapter 3, the muskrat's hammock falls down, and he makes his way to live in Sniff's cave, angered. He finds the hat and puts his dentures in it before falling asleep. At the Moomin house, Moomin and Snufkin is informed that the muskrat has moved to the cave and are mortified because of the hat. The whole family makes their way to the cave and is met by a scared and upset muskrat who refuses to tell them what the dentures turned into. We, the audience, don't get to know either. There's only a footnote from Tove, basically stating, if you want to know, ask your mother. This is kind of like a common theme with the books. Sometimes she leaves funny little footnotes on the pages, and she repeats, like, ask your mother several times, which I find really funny. The Moomin family finds a boat in the sand, washed ashore. Moomin Mama names it The Adventure. They sail away on the adventure and end up on the Hattifattener Island. The Hattifatteners are small, white, electric creatures with no eyes, ears, or mouths. Moomin and the Snork siblings set exploring separately from Snufkin, who wants to explore alone, and the Heeheelun goes off to find new, interesting plants. The Hattifatteners walk around on the island. There's a barometer on a pole, and the Hattifatteners bow before it every time they pass by. The Heeheelun accidentally bumps into this barometer while searching for plants, and the Hattifatteners surround him. He whistles out an SOS signal, and Snufkin comes to his rescue. The Heeheelun climbs up on the pole where the barometer is located, and Snufkin tells him to shake it back and forth to create vibrations in the ground, which will scare the Hattifatteners away since they don't see or hear very well. The Heeheelun steals the barometer, and a storm comes. The group takes cover under the sail of the boat, and Snufkin goes to check the coast. He sees the wizard, aka the owner of the hat, and his panther illuminated against the dark sky. Snufkin decides not to tell the others about the wizard, since they're already scared. The storm eventually dies down, and everyone is safe. Chapter 4. Snork Maiden wakes up from a burnt smell, and wakes Moomin and Snufkin. The Hattifatteners have invaded the tent, looking for the barometer, and they are electric because of the energy from the storm. The Hattifatteners climb over the Heeheelun and grabs the barometer, which scares him. At this point, everyone wakes up, causing a ruckus that ultimately ruins the tent. The gang sits on the shore and watches as the Hattifatteners leave with their barometer, sailing out to sea. Snork Maiden falls asleep in Moomin's lap, and when he eventually tries to wake her, he discovers that her hair has been burnt off by the Hattifatteners. Snork Maiden understandably freaks out, but is calmed down by the Moomin family, who reassures her that it will grow out even more beautiful. Snufkin plays a song on his harmonica, and the children all bathe in the ocean. The gang goes to explore the island. Moomin Mama takes a nap in the warm sand, Snork finds gold in a cliff that has been divided in half by lightning, and Moomintroll and Sniff finds a snow globe. Snufkin meets Moominpappa, who is attempting to build a small wharf for the boat. Snufkin himself doesn't want to pick anything up from the shore, but Snork Maiden is walking around and looking, having covered up her burnt hair with a crown out of sea lilies. Snork Maiden finds a figurehead in the form of a beautiful woman that has fallen off a ship. Originally, Snork Maiden mistakes it for a huge, presumably dead woman without legs, which is just kind of disturbing. They go home on the boat, and Moomin loves the figurehead, which makes Snork Maiden so jealous that she turns gray. Moomin then pretends to dislike the figurehead, which makes her happier again. Chapter 5. It's now late July and very hot in Moominvalley. The children are cranky, so Moomin Mama sends them away to live in the cave for a while to make them happy and to give her some peace. In the cave, Snufkin tells everyone a story about the wizard, his black panther, his rubies, and his house with no roof. He tells them that he can't be happy until he finds the king's ruby, which he has searched for on all planets. He believes it's on the sun, since it's the only place he can't go due to the heat. Snufkin then confesses that this isn't a story and that it's all true. They figure out that the hat they found earlier must be the wizard's hat. The Heeheelun wakes up because the hole he has dug to sleep in is water-filled because it's raining, and asks to sleep with Snork. Snork gets mad and refuses, whereupon the Heeheelun digs a canal that fills Snork's sleeping hole with water as well. That wasn't an important detail, by the way, I just kept it because I thought it was funny. The two decide that they should all go fishing and wakes everybody up. Back at home, Moomin Mama is happy to have some peace and rain, as it is good for her garden. She absent-mindedly throws some trash in the wizard's hat, which is once again placed in the Moomin house, and goes to take a nap. The gang is fishing, and some are more happy about it than others. They have no luck, until suddenly something big lashes onto their hook. They think it's the mameluck, a very big fish. The fish is so big that it creates a big wave and snaps their fishing line. They put a pancake as bait and tries again, and the same thing happens, Except this time the fishing line doesn't snap and they're all dragged out to sea really fast by the Mameluke. Snufkin plays his harmonica to lure the fish, and they manage to catch him and take him to shore. They carry the fish through the forest on their way home, only to find that the Moomin house has been changed. It is covered with giant vines, leaves, flowers, and fruits that grew out of the hat while they were gone. Moominmamma and Moominpappa notices the change and can't get out due to the vegetation blocking the doors and windows. Moominpappa manages to chop some growth with an axe, and the parents are reunited with the children. The children play Tarzan in the overgrown house, but as the night came and it stopped raining and the air turned colder, the plants die. The mule makes a big bonfire out of them, and the gang cooks and eats the giant fish. Chapter 6. Thingamy and Bob arrives at the Moomin house, carrying a suitcase. They get scared, however, when Moominmamma yells to the others, so they go into the basement. Moominmamma assumes that they are rats since she only catches a glimpse of them. Sniff comes down to give them milk, but gets Moominmamma when he realizes that they aren't rats. Thingamy and Bob moves into the Moomin house. They don't speak much, aside from their own strange language, and holds each other's hand. At night, they alert everyone that the Groke is coming, so they barricade themselves in, and Moominpappa goes to get his rifle. For context, and for those who don't know, the Groke is every Nordic kid's childhood nightmare. I remember running out of the room when I saw her on TV as a kid. She is this big, dark creature that wears what looks like a giant piece of cloth, and everything she touches freezes to ice, and she makes this really creepy noise in the 90s series.
Hör nu morra, vi skulle vara väldigt glada om du gick hem.
Anyway, the Moomin family sees her, but she just turns around and leaves, so there's no altercation. The morning after, we find out that the reason the Grow came to the house was Thingamy and Bob's suitcase. They have a small makeshift trial about the suitcase, and the Grow shows up and actually speaks in this book, which is something she doesn't do in other iterations. Anyway, the trial ends when they settle on a trade where the Groke gets the wizard's hat in exchange for Thingamy and Bob keeping the suitcase. Chapter 7, the last chapter. It's the end of August, and Moomintroll wakes up and discovers that Snufkin is gone. He finds him outside, and they sit down on the bridge together, just as they did in the beginning of the book. Snufkin tells Moomin that he's leaving for the winter, and Moomin cries. Back at the house, he's comforted by Thingamy and Bob, who decides to show him the contents of the suitcase to cheer him up. It turns out to be the king's ruby that the wizard is searching for. Moomin is greeted by Snork Maiden, who shows him her new haircut. He tells her that he is sad because Snufkin has left, but brags about being the only one to get a goodbye. Again, this wasn't an important detail, but I thought it was funny. Moominmamma is sad because she has lost her handbag. They send out flyers, and a big search party is conducted. At last, Thingamy and Bob reveals that they were the ones that hid it. They have a fall party as a celebration for finding the purse, but Thingamy and Bob show everyone the ruby, which is so red that the wizard can see it from the moon where he is currently located. He instantly crashes the party and wants the ruby back. Thingamy and Bob refuses, and the wizard starts doing party tricks to kind of ease them up, I guess. He starts granting wishes, and Snork Maiden starts wishing for him to change her eyes to, like, these beautiful, really big eyes. It goes too far, however, and she regrets her decision, and her brother has to use his wish to wish them back to normal. Thingamy and Bob wishes for a new, identical ruby, and the wizard happily obliges, which pleases everyone. And then they all party into the night. So, again, my own thoughts on this book. Sorry it was so long. But I love the little adventures they go on, and the, like, take it as it comes mindset everyone has in the Moomin family. It's, like, really refreshing to read, especially for a children's book, where usually in children's book there are like really strict rules and stuff for children to learn. So I think this book is just a refreshment, you know. Also, I do love the Groke despite her traumatizing me as a child. I think it's quite obvious that she's supposed to represent loneliness and isolation and driving everyone away with her cold, even though she means no harm, which is just so sad, but I'm sure everyone feels like that sometimes. So I think it's a very like relatable character in a sense. I also love Thingamy and Bob, especially knowing what they're inspired by. Also, I think it's very cute to see Moomin like missing Snufkin and, you know, anticipating his arrival in spring and stuff. The next book we're going to talk about is The Exploits of Moominpappa. This is definitely one of my favorite books in the series because it really gives us some more of that, you know, lore and introduces some new characters, as well as give us background stories for some of the characters and their parents. And I want to begin by apologizing for shading Moominpappa in this one. He's just so damn pretentious and self-absorbed that he becomes a very unreliable narrator, and it's just really funny to me. Anyway, the book starts with a prologue describing a flashback of Moominpappa's from when Moomin was small. Moominpappa was sick and couldn't do anything, being his melodramatic self. So he gets restless, and Moomin Mama comes up with the idea that he should write a memoir. In the foreword, Moominpappa describes that he is sitting in his study and pondering his youth. He briefly goes over that the memoir is going to be about his youth, and that some details have been changed for dramatic effect or to protect those involved, which, again, makes him a very unreliable narrator, I'm afraid. He teases that the contents of the memoir will include Snufkin's dad, Jockster, and Sniff's father, the Muddler. Now, we do know that these characters are in fact real, because, spoiler, they'll turn up later in the book in present day, so. He also shouts out someone called Fredrickson, that we'll get to know later, the Hattefatteners, and a Moomin Mama. The first chapter begins with the beginning of the memoir, and each chapter has these really cute drop caps with characters from the memoir on them. Moominpappa describes how he was dropped off at an orphanage for Moomintrolls in a bag as a kid, wrapped in newspaper. The orphanage is, according to Moominpappa, run by a Hamule who was strict and uncaring. To summarize, Moominpappa had a bunch of existential questions and yearned for adventure, which the Hamule kept shutting down, which made him hate his life at the orphanage. Moominpappa didn't bond with the other children either, and Moominpappa slowly started growing his giant ego that we see him display in current time. Basically, nobody understood him, and it made him feel special. One day in early spring, he ran down to the ocean, where he's not allowed to go, and looks at his reflection in the water by laying down on the ice. Which, I don't know if it's supposed to be a reference, but it's like literally Narcissus. He looks at the water beneath the ice and gets scared, so he stomps on it. Which, why? But it gets worse. It doesn't break, so he goes further out and stomps again, which obviously makes him fall through the ice. Okay, Moominpappa. He manages to crawl back up onto the ice and considers this stupid misadventure his first canon event. So that night he ties a bunch of sheets together and escapes from the orphanage, leaving a note behind stating, "Dear Hamule, I feel that I have big things awaiting me and that the Moomin life is short. Therefore I am leaving this place. Farewell. Don't despair. I'll return adorned with crowns of victory. P.S. I am taking a jar of pumpkin mash. Bye-bye. Greetings from a Moomintroll who is not like the rest." Girl. Anyway, he escapes through the forest at night and is scared by everything around him. It's kind of like that one scene in Snow White, you know? For 2 days, he walks and talks with all the animals of the forest. Inspired by his beautiful surroundings, he draws a house in the sand, planning his future home, and goes a little insane because he's so consumed by his own fantasies that he thinks that the house is already built. I seriously worry for his mental health. While recovering from these delusions, he meets someone called Fredrickson, who kindly listens to his stories and offers him half of his sandwich. Moominpappa recounts that during his long friendship with Fredrickson, he's always been fascinated with his ability to calm people down without saying anything. And this personally kind of reminds me of Snufkin. So for me, the relationship of Moominpappa and Fredrickson kind of works as a parallel to Moomin and Snufkin, which I think is really fun. In Chapter 2, Moominpappa and Fredrickson continue talking the following morning, and Fredrickson reveals that he has a nephew called the Muddler. And if you remember, the Muddler is Sniff's dad, although Sniff isn't born yet, obviously, so this means that Fredrickson is essentially Sniff's great uncle. The Muddler lives in a blue coffee jar since it has lost its parents. Seriously, why is this a pattern? And so now it lives on its own. And yes, the Muddler has it pronouns in the book, so yeah, that's what I'll use. The Muddler is described as very jumpy and babbles constantly. It's also very nervous, scared, and emotional constantly. Fredrickson tells Moominpappa and the Muddler that he has a surprise and shows them a big boat named the Ocean Orchestra. We learn that Fredrickson's brother is missing, as he states that the boat is named after his missing brother's poetry collection, which that's so beautiful and so sad. On board the boat, we're introduced to Jockster, who is sleeping under his hat aboard the boat. He is described as dirty with cat-like behavior. He's also described to love breaking rules, just like his future son Snufkin. The Muddler serves them omelette, but accidentally drops 2 tiny gears in Fredrickson's bowl, which gives him an idea for the boat. They then finish the boat together. Now, we cut to the present, where Moominpappa is reading the memoir to Moomin, Sniff, and Snufkin. Sniff and Snufkin immediately starts asking about their dads, but Moominpappa doesn't reveal that much. He just casually counters with, well, you never know with dads, they come and they go, which is like, yeah, if they're deadbeats. Like, what? Like, the standard for parenting in Moominvalley, I mean, the bar must surely be in hell, right? Anyway, Moominpappa continues writing about the construction of the boat and how much Jockster complained about the labor, stating that no matter how much you work and learn, it'll be useless if the Grok comes and eats you one day, which, okay. The gang all wants to leave on the boat, but the boat's wheels are stuck, and so Fredrickson calls Edward the Booble, which is a big, grumpy lake monster, to try and get the boat loose. Fredrickson manages to trick Edward so that he creates a big wave which rocks the boat loose and the gang is off. Chapter 3. They go out on adventures with the Ocean Orchestra. Jockster is wary, claiming that he can feel the Grok as they ride into a deep bay area. It's described how they can hear her hunting up in the mountains, which is just a terrifying thought, and how her lonely howling reaches their boat now and then. Suddenly, they see someone running away from her on the mountain, so Moominpappa jumps in the water to save them. When he has brought this person onto the boat, it turns out to be the aunt of the Hamule that runs the orphanage, and she is just as strict as her niece, so everyone is bothered by her presence, especially Jockster, who hates rules. The Hamule's aunt enforces things like waking up early and decides that she should take care of the gang since none of them have parents. I don't even have a comment about that anymore. Now, the boat accidentally drifts into the river's delta, and it is filled with hyraxes, which are small mammals that looks like rabbits-ish. Now, in the Moomin world, these creatures are described to bite anything and anyone. This includes biting off your nose if they consider it too big, which is just extremely rude. And so, understandably, the gang is eager to get away. Now, the Hamule's aunt tries to drive them away, but they happen to consider her nose too big and steals her away. So the gang just quietly sails away from this scene. As they sail amongst many islands, Moominpappa recounts what he's learned so far, which includes things like you never know what you're going to catch with your net, and avoid saving someone in the dark. They reach the ocean, and Fredrickson and Jockster tells Moominpappa about the Hattefatteners and their endless journey to try and reach the horizon. They tie the boat at the cliffy coast and go ashore to pick some seashells, and stays there until dark, whereupon they make the unpleasant discovery that their boat has sailed off on its own. Turns out a hyrax chewed off the rope, and it has been hiding on board since they sailed past the delta. Chapter 4. Moominpappa is steering the boat at night, and Jockster comes up, smoking his pipe, and talks to him. Jockster tells him to admit that it's nice doing nothing, whereupon Moominpappa counters with that he is doing something. He's steering and Jockster is smoking. I just thought it was funny to include, because the Jockster really just loves doing nothing. The following morning, as Moominpappa and Fredrickson are changing post, Moominpappa tells him of Jockster's lack of interest for his surroundings. Fredrickson comments that he most likely cares about everything, just in a more calm and unnoticeable way than others. In the afternoon, they discover a big cloud that looks unreal and cartoonish, and it starts following them and settles on the deck of the ship, falling asleep, so it's basically a living creature. Jockster, of course, crawls right on top of it and lies down to sleep. Moominpappa checks the aneroid barometer, an instrument that measures air pressure, and realizes it's very low, which means that a storm is coming. The boat is caught in the big storm and nearly tips over, but the cloud suddenly inflates, acting almost like a hot air balloon and lifting them above the waves. They're let back into the water once it is safe, and makes coffee as the sun starts rising. They reach shore, but are found by Edward the Booble, who is very angry with them for tricking him. We cut to the present, where Moominpappa ends with this cliffhanger, and Sniff, Moomin, and Snufkin ask him questions about his life and the continuation of the memoir. They find a piece of the ocean orchestra in the river, and Moominpappa gets emotional, which inspires him to keep writing the memoir. That leads us to Chapter 5. Edward the Booble is literally plotting to kill them by sitting on them, but Moominpappa manages to convince him otherwise by gifting him the cloud as a sleeping bag. Of course. They make their way through the foreign land, covered in stone walls and small straw houses. They hear a sound from one of the houses and knocks, being greeted by Mimble's daughter, who is distraught because her mother, the Mimble, has gone to a party without her as punishment because she keeps lying and tricking her. They all go to the party together, and Moominpappa is excited when Mimble's daughter tells him that the king of the land will be in attendance. Mimble's daughter also tells them that all the stone walls everywhere are simply built because the people who built them thinks it's fun to build. We're also informed that Mimble currently has 14 to 15 siblings. Keep this in mind for a bit later. The gang arrives at the party and see a sign that states the Autocrat's Garden Party. Free entry. Welcome, welcome. Yearly surprise gala. This time in great style due to our 100th year anniversary. Do not fret if something happens. They walk through the rugged garden and are indeed surprised by a big fake spider. When they reach a lake, they're pranked with a jet stream of water, and when they reach several rope bridges, they are attacked by a bull. They then reach a bunch of eggs with numbers on them, that is, for a lottery, and then they're finally at the party. At the party, they spot a merry-go-round and several excited partygoers, and goes to the autocrat's throne to congratulate him. The autocrat, or the king, starts shouting out the lottery numbers, and several people in the gang win things like chocolate balls, marzipan mules, and cotton candy roses. The king reveals that he has hidden the eggs in specific ways, and that the way you found it corresponds with what you get. The gang wins some more prizes, and Moominpappa specifically wins a decorative miniature of a train made out of coral, a champagne whisk decorated with rubies, a shark tooth, a preserved ring of smoke, and a decorated knob belonging to a barrel organ. Okay. Moominpappa is very happy with his gifts, and the party commences. Moominpappa bumps into Mimble, the mother, who is described as round and constantly laughing. Now, interestingly enough, she says she has 19 kids, but if you remember earlier, her daughter, the Mimble, says she has 14 to 15 siblings. So, this either means that the Mimble, the mother, gave birth to a few more kids without her daughter's knowledge, or that her daughter just lied or just forgot how many siblings she had. And I honestly, with how these characters are written, I feel like both options are equally plausible here. Anyway, Mimble, the mother, gets on the merry-go-round with as many children as she can fit, and Jockster catches sight of her and says, "A remarkable Mimble." Yeah, he's definitely a simp. The gang heads back, except for Jockster, because he's too busy simping over his newfound MILF. Sorry, I don't know what flew into me when I wrote the script. Now, the chapter ends with it going back into the present again, with Moominpappa reading to the children, and Snufkin interferes before Moominpappa can start reading the next chapter. Now, I don't know for sure, but I think that Snufkin at this point doesn't know that Mimble is his mother, so he asks rather jealously whether his dad liked the Mimble more than he liked Snufkin. Moominpappa assures him that he didn't exist yet, so there's no need to worry about that, but Snufkin gets grumpy anyway, which I thought was kind of hilarious and cute. Moominpappa gives him the shark tooth to kind of console him, stating that Jockster used to adore it, and Snufkin accepts. Chapter 6. Now we're back in Moominpappa's youth again, just to be clear. Moominpappa, Fredrickson, the Hyrax, and Mimble are sitting on the ship drinking coffee when Fredrickson all of a sudden gets a telegraph from a Hemule guard. The telegraph is from the king, who states that he wants Fredrickson to help the court since he is an inventor. Moominpappa is devastated since this means they won't be able to continue their adventurous journey together. But Fredrickson merely tells him that he can start a colony with the others. This makes Moominpappa very mopey, and he goes to Mimble's daughter's house to be comforted. Mimble's daughter is washing her siblings underneath a faucet, and Moominpappa tells her that he will be starting a colony against his will, which he doesn't even know what that means, but She takes this as an invitation to join him, even though he doesn't want her to. So, Moominpappa, Mimble's daughter, the Muddler, and Jockster starts a quote-unquote colony together. However, none of them know what a colony is, so Moominpappa tells them that they're going on a surprise adventure on Friday at midnight instead. However, he himself has no idea what he's going to surprise them with. At night, they all split up. Jockster sleeps in an apple tree near Mimble's house. Okay. Mimble's daughter sleeps in different places each night for fun. The Muddler continues to sleep in his coffee tin, and Moominpappa sleeps in the navigation cabin that was left behind when Fredrickson moved the ship. Moominpappa, the dramatic man that he is, feels unneeded and unwanted, so he goes to Fredrickson to ask him for advice. Fredrickson tells him to do whatever he feels like doing, which just doesn't help at all. So Moominpappa ends up in this really depressing mood, but of course he also finds himself liking the feeling of being a victim because he likes pity, because of course he does. Now, in this sad, depressed state, he needs a project to keep himself distracted. So he starts changing the navigation cabin, adding things like levels and floors and stairs, and basically he builds it into something that resembles the Moomin house. However, all of a sudden on Thursday night, a ghost comes towards his house to haunt him. Moominpappa is understandably scared at first and hides under his bed as the ghost knocks on the door. Here we cut to the present day, where the kids question Moominpappa's creative choices slightly. This of course makes him very mad, so he goes downstairs to mope. Moomin Mama comforts him, and after some moping, he goes upstairs again to continue reading. Back to the memoir, the ghost comes into Moominpappa's house and scares him, but it accidentally sneezes from the cold, and all fear suddenly goes away, and Moominpappa emerges from under the bed. The ghost continues to try and scare him, but it doesn't go that well, so it leaves, and Moominpappa is happy because now he has something to surprise his colony with. He invites everyone in the colony for dinner, so Jockster, Fredrickson, the Muddler, and Mimble's daughter. When the clock strikes 12, the ghost appears. Everyone is shocked, even Jockster. And at first, Moominpappa is thinking that it's going really well. But then, Mimble's daughter goes up to the ghost and introduces herself, which throws the ghost off, since his mission is to kind of scare them, and so he shrinks in on himself out of insecurity. The night is ruined, and it has consequences. For the now scorned ghost wakes them every night for a week by rattling chains and just generally being annoying while they're trying to sleep. Now, a funny detail that I found here was that the ghost tries to scare the Muddler by writing poison on its coffee tin, and it does scare it, but not for the right reasons. You see, the Swedish word for poison is gift, and the word for getting married is also gift, and they're both spelled and pronounced the same. I don't know why. So, while the Muddler gets scared, it doesn't get scared of poison, it gets scared of marriage, which I thought was really funny. Anyway, Jockster asks Moominpappa to get rid of the ghost, since it's bothering everyone, so they set up a meeting. The ghost agrees to leave them alone in exchange for Fredrickson teaching him how to get better at scaring people, which he sucks at. The ghost also joins the colony that is now called the Royal Lawless Colony. Chapter 7. During the midsummer night, the youngest of Mimble's daughters are born, Little Mai, whose name means the very smallest. As you can imagine, I am very excited because she's my favorite, and finally she enters the book series. But anyway, this means that Little Mai isn't just older than Snufkin, she's also older than Moomin and Sniff, probably at least by a few years. Now, Moominpappa is very bored because what was supposed to be a stop on a journey has turned into a seemingly permanent residency. Mimble's daughter continues to trick people, Edward the Booble keeps yelling at people, and Jockster sleeps, eats, laughs with Mimble, and climbs trees. It's all too commonplace for Moominpappa. He needs something to happen. Then, one day, Fredrickson reveals that the ship, who he has been working on for the court, can now fly, and Moominpappa gets all excited again. The king throws a party for the first test flight, and Mimble, the mother, joins them, asking her daughter if she has seen her newest little siblings anywhere, whereupon Mimble's daughter replies, "Mom, you've made new ones again?" Which is just like unhinged. Now, the ship doesn't start because it turns out that Little Mai has poured porridge in the exhaust pipe. Queen Pranksterson's birth. But this also means that Mimbles are born capable of talking and performing actions that babies typically cannot, which I think would explain how so many children in Moominvalley keep racing themselves without parents. I think it's because they're never really the human equivalent of babies, you know? Anyway, the king holds a speech, and then the ocean orchestra flies away with the whole gang on board, including Mimble and her children. They fly for a while, and then Fredricksen steers them right down into the ocean suddenly, revealing that the boat works as a submarine as well. They travel through the ocean, and all of a sudden the fishes around them start whispering about an ocean hound, which scares them. The fishes tells them to turn off their lights, otherwise they will be eaten by this ocean hound, and Mimble tries to make her kids sleep so that they won't be scared. The ocean hound comes, but they can't see it since they've turned the lights off and everything is dark. Fredricksen steers the ship down to the bottom of the ocean, and they crawl forward, the ocean hound huffing and puffing around them. Just when they think they're done for, and little Mai informs them very matter-of-factly that they are going to be eaten, Edward the Booble comes and accidentally tramples the ocean hound to death, completely unknowingly. Everyone celebrates and they go back to the surface. There's also this hilarious picture of little Mai in strong magnification where she's shown in a magnifying glass. And even seen through this glass, she's super tiny, which means that without a magnifying glass, she's basically microscopic, which is just so funny to me. I joke about this picture regularly with people I know because it's just so funny how small she's supposed to be canonically when she's born. Obviously, she grows as the series goes on, but it's just, yeah, it's kind of comical. Anyway, that brings us to chapter 8, which is the last chapter. Yes, this has been very long, I apologize. When they reach the shore, the king is in deep distress over a wedding that turns out to be the Muddler's. The Muddler has apparently met a Fuzzy who it is going to marry while they were gone. Now, a Fuzzy seems to be a similar looking animal to the Muddlers, so they might be the same species, only male and female, although I'm not sure. Anyway, the party is going to be grand, and the Muddler has invited Hyrex's and the Hemule's aunt, who is apparently alive, hence the chaos. When the gang meets the Muddler and the Fuzzy, they've both already gotten married because they couldn't wait, which upsets the king even more. Mimble, the mother, tells her children to congratulate the couple, whereupon little Mai states that they've in fact poisoned themselves. Again, this is a pun related to the Swedish word gift. We cut to present time where Moominpappa is reading to the kids, and Sniff is upset because he hasn't mentioned his mother earlier. Now, this leads to Snufkin asking Moominpappa if he has a mother as well, which leads to Moominpappa revealing that Mimble is in fact his mother. Snufkin is understandably surprised that little Mai, who he seemingly knows at this point, is his half-sister, but Moominpappa, in typical Moominpappa fashion, brushes it aside and continues as it is, quote, my memoirs and not some genealogy research, end quote. He's really something. Anyway, the wedding party commences and everyone has heard about the Hemule's aunt and are therefore worried about her attendance. Later, however, a Hyrax arrives with the message that the aunt can't attend and the partygoers are happy again. We jump to the present yet again, where the Moomin family is now sitting on the porch. Moominpappa informs them that the last part of his memoirs is about how he met Moomin Mama. Back to the memoir again, Moominpappa, Fredricksen, and the rest of the gang go on occasional small adventures together, but Moominpappa wants more, as usual. An influx of storms ruin the frail houses of the land, which results in everyone moving into Moominpappa's newly built house. The family life that comes as a result leaves him restless. One stormy night, he slips out from the house just to watch the weather. He feels cooped up and locked in, and I would say he has slipped into some kind of depression. He walks down to the beach and spots a Moomintroll floating amongst the giant waves. He runs out to save them and does so successfully, realizing that it's a female Moomintroll, Moomin Mama. Moomin Mama immediately tells him to save her bag, priorities, but he informs her that she's holding it. She immediately retrieves some powder and comments that it's probably damaged by the water. Moominpappa tells her that she doesn't need it. She's beautiful anyway, and she blushes, it's adorable. I love the way they met. Anyway, that moves us on to the epilogue. In current time, they all celebrate the memoir being finished. Snufkin and Sniff ask about their dads and what happened to them, and very conveniently, the book even jokes about how unlikely this is, there are knocks on the door. Outside is the whole cast from the memoir. Fredrickson, the ghost, Jockster, Mimble, and her children, 34 now, and little Mai, who has not grown at all, according to the book, and the muddler and its wife. They all hug and catch up, and Fredrickson announces that they should all venture out with the Ocean Orchestra, parents and children alike. And that's the ending of the book. It's a very, fairy tale-esque ending. But my final thoughts on the book, despite how complicated and, straight up strange this book is, I love it. I love that it's focused on fleshing out the ancestors of some of the characters, and that it gives more context to who Moominpappa is as a person. Again, I think the events of this book are definitely stranger than early books. Things are just so random in this book for some reason. Like the random cloud that saves them from the storm that is just never really explained, and stuff like that. But despite all of that, it's still one of my favorite. It just has to be. It also introduces little Mai, which is obviously a huge plus for me for obvious reasons. So, yeah, I really like this book. The next book is called Moominsummer Madness. Like Fin Family Moomintroll, this book starts by showing us a map of a part of Moominvalley. This time, the map shows us a part called Pine Tree Bay. The map is marked with several events to come in the book, showing where they took place. The book starts with a message from Tove, reading Tu Vivika. Chapter 1. Moomin Mama is sitting on the porch, making a tiny boat, while Mimble, as in Mimble's daughter, and little Mai is sitting beside her, watching. Little Mai is in a yarn basket, and she's still tiny as ever. Soot starts falling from the sky, and Moomin Mama reveals that it's from a nearby volcano. Moomin Mama finds Moomin by the water and gives him the boat, and he rubs his nose against her, telling her it's the prettiest thing she's ever made, which is it's just so cute. Back at the house, Mimble is yelling for her sister, who has hidden herself somewhere as usual. Now, Mimble reveals to Moominpappa that she is now the one who is officially racing little Mai, because her mother told her, quote, "I'll leave her in your care. If you can't race her, no one can, because I refrained from the start." Which is just textbook parenting right there. Now, we switch to Moomin's perspective, and he is a bit sad because he's missing Snufkin. Snufkin hasn't returned for spring as he usually does, and now it's summer, so he's also getting a bit worried. Now, there's a very interesting quote here that I have seen other people talk about as well, and it's, quote, "Snufkin was his best friend. Of course he liked Snork Maiden an awful lot as well, but still, it can't exactly be the same with a girl," end quote. Now, I've seen people point out that this quote is very queer-coded, and I'm inclined to agree. Obviously, we can't know what the intent behind this really was, but personally, I'm willing to bet that it is a queer intent. Anyway, Snork Maiden shows up, and Moomin is disappointed she's not Snufkin. She tries to get him to play a game where she is a beautiful maiden and he tries to steal her away, but he tells her that she doesn't have to pretend to be beautiful because she already is, and that they can play tomorrow instead. Moomintroll and Snork Maiden tries to sleep in the bushes that night due to the heat, but they're awoken by the earth literally splitting open and choose to sleep on the porch instead. However, a big tsunami appears, and the Moomin family takes cover on the second floor of the house that is somehow sturdy enough to withstand all the water. Now, this tsunami occurred because of the previously mentioned volcanic eruption. Chapter 2. The day after, the volcano has calmed, but everything is covered in water. Moominpappa drills a hole in the floor down to the kitchen, which is completely underwater, and Moomin dives in to try and retrieve some food that is still edible. They manage to scrape a few edible things like coffee and marmalade and eat breakfast together. We cut to a couple of mice stuck on the roof of a woodshed who argue over the cause of the flood, and then to a Whomper and a Mizabel who joins in on the conversation. Now, Whompers and Mizabels are basically humanoid creatures. Whompers are known to be kind of anxious and uncertain, and Mizabels are known to be very, self-deprecating and to have very low self-confidence. Now, all of these creatures catch sight of the Moomin house and gets close enough to enter. As they enter, they are welcomed by the Moomin family. The chapter ends with the second story of the house finally flooding. Chapter 3. The Moomin family has been forced to evacuate to the roof of their house, and together with their guests, they sit there debating on what in the house they should save. They're waiting on something to float by so that they can jump on top of that, and suddenly a big seashell-shaped thing floats towards them, and they decide that it'll have to be their new home for now, and jumps on board with the things they've saved. They search the vessel and find a bunch of things, but everything is fake and painted. For example, they find a fake palm tree, fake kitchen utensils, and food items, and painted backdrops. The gang continues to be scared by different things around the floating vessel, like things falling down from the ceiling, huffs and puffs coming from someone they can't see, and big dark curtains. The gang is confused about exactly what this contraption they've ended up on is. Chapter 4. The company makes do with what they have, decorating the vessel with the things they've managed to save from the house, and enjoying the giant curtains that they are able to pull together to keep out the wind, and the decorative paintings that are hanging from the ceiling. However, it is clear that someone else is there with them, for they keep hearing random laughing and huffing now and then. They put out food for this mystery being, assuming they are just shy. Now, we cut to Snork Maiden, Mimble, and Mizabel, who are all combing their hair and kind of commenting about their looks. Now, a few inappropriate comments sent Mizabel crying and running away further into the vessel, but she's stopped in her tracks and scared by the creepy laughter and hides in the closet. While in the closet, Mizabel tries different wigs to try and feel beautiful, but nothing is working for her, so she just gets sad. Snork Maiden goes looking for Mizabel to comfort her, but finds another closet instead, where there are a bunch of dresses. She gets really happy and plays around with them for a while. At dinner, Snork Maiden and Mizabel makes up, and Snork Maiden informs everyone of the big variety of dresses at the back of the vessel. Right as they are about to eat, however, a gray creature with whiskers appears from the back of the vessel and introduces herself as Emma, the old theater rat. Now, Emma is obviously the source of the mysterious laughter. Emma reveals that the vessel is in fact a theater, and the Moomin family is confused since they don't know what a theater is. Emma is very offended by this. At night, they tie the floating theater to a tree, and Moomin and Snork Maiden decide to sleep in it. So, they grab a rope ladder and climb up. At night, when everyone is sleeping, however, Emma accidentally throws the rope that binds the theater to the tree in the water, thinking it was trash. Chapter 5. Moomin and Snork Maiden wakes up in the tree alone as the theater has floated away. Snork Maiden is understandably scared and cries, but after looking through their food stash provided by Moomin Mama, Moomin assures her that they'll be fine. Moomin and Snork Maiden climb through the trees until they eventually reach land, where they meet a bunch of small creatures trying to burn pine cones for a midsummer fire. They both get melancholy because they remember that it is in fact Midsummer Night, which makes them rather homesick as they think of the midsummer celebrations of the previous years. They keep walking and find a small house, but no one seems to be home. We cut back to the theater where Moomin Mama is very worried for Moomin and Snork Maiden. Little Mai, however, is very interested about the little hatch on stage that leads down into the water. So she's constantly looking at it. The theater suddenly hits shore, which makes the entire thing rock and tilt, which makes Little Mai fall into the water, but no one notices. Chapter 6. Little Mai is so small and light that she floats almost immediately. She finds Moomin Mama's yarn basket floating around and lies down in it, falling asleep as the current carries her away. Snufkin happens to be close to the shore, and his fishing line gets stuck in Little Mai's basket. He recognizes that she's a Mimble, but doesn't recognize who she is, as she was much smaller the last time he saw her. He offers her some coffee and then puts her in his pocket so that she can sleep for a while, and he moves on. Snufkin doesn't seem to know about how bad the wave was because he wonders about Moomin and his family and imagines them happy together celebrating midsummer at the Moomin house. He's thinking that Moomin probably misses him but needs some time before he's ready to return to Moominvalley. He says that he has some errands to take care of. Snufkin plays on his harmonica and Little Mai wakes up singing the lyrics to the song. Snufkin asks how she knows the lyrics, but she only replies that she has a secret and says something cryptic about the floating theater that Snufkin obviously doesn't understand. Therefore, he misses the pretty crucial information that the Moomin family might be nearby. Snufkin states that he also has a secret and that he is about to set things straight with someone wicked. He reaches the fence of a park full of signs with rules on them. It is explained how the park keeper and his wife lives in there, and that they're keeping a bunch of forest kids imprisoned since they've been lost by their parents, which I'm pretty sure is like kidnapping. Snufkin is planning on scaring the park keeper since they're old enemies, which, I mean, is kind of understandable because Snufkin really hates rules and signs and stuff like that. So he gets a bunch of Hattifattener seeds, yes, Hattifatteners grow from seeds, and explain to Little Mai that they only grow on midsummer nights. He plants them all around the park. The Hattifatteners grow since it is midsummer night, and the park keeper and his wife get electrocuted by them and run away screaming, leaving the forest kids unattended. Snufkin starts tearing all the signs with rules on them down, but the kids, 24 of them, thinks he is saving them, and so when he leaves, they follow. Snufkin basically tells the kids to get lost, but they continue to follow him, and he is slightly horrified, remarking that he's not even sure if he likes kids. However, he's stuck with them, and so continues on with the kids in tow. And I gotta say, I am living for involuntary Father Snufkin arc. Chapter 7. It is described how Snufkin builds shelter for the kids out of spruce branches, which is adorable, and that he's in the same forest as Moomin and Snork Maiden, unbeknownst to all of them, of course. Now, we change perspective to a lonely fillyjonk, who is anxiously walking around her house waiting for midsummer guests. They are, however, very late, and so she's starting to think that they won't show up. Now, this is the same house that Moomin and Snork Maiden saw before. So she hears a few knocks at the door and opens it excitedly, but is disappointed to find that it is in fact Moomin and Snork Maiden at the door. Now, Moomin and Snork Maiden asks her if she's seen the theater, which she hasn't. She then starts crying, explaining that she keeps inviting her uncle and his wife each year for midsummer, but they never show up. But they're her only family and she has nobody else to invite. Moomin and Snork Maiden feel bad for her and celebrate with her instead, and they all go into the forest to light a midsummer fire. They find the signs that Snufkin has thrown into the forest and uses it as fuel for the fire, since no one is using it anyway. Snorkmaiden tells Fillyjonk to pick 9 sorts of flowers and then look into an old well to see her future soulmate in the water's reflection. Now they both perform this midsummer ritual, but are instead met with the reflection of a Hemule dressed as a police officer. Turns out he's actually standing right beside them. The police officer immediately arrests them, assuming that they're the ones who has taken all the signs since, they were the ones who burned them. Now, they can't say anything in their own defense because part of the midsummer ritual is that you cannot say a word until you've seen your sweetheart in your reflection, so they're dragged away in silence. Chapter 8. Back at the theater, Moomin Mama and Moominpappa are still worried about Moomin and Snorkmaiden, but Mimble isn't very worried about little Mai. She's more worried about the people that happen to bump into her. Emma is cleaning fervently because things in the theater keeps breaking since the entire structure is tilted. Emma reveals that she used to be married to the stage director, but that he died in a theater-related accident. Quote, "The iron curtain rod landed on his head and they both split apart," end quote. Which, that's so graphic for no reason. She shows Moomin Mama a picture of her late husband and his niece, Fillyjonk, which she finds annoying because she keeps sending midsummer invite cards. So, as you've probably gathered, this is the Fillyjonk that Moomin and Snorkmaiden just celebrated midsummer with. Moomin Mama asks Emma about the theater, and she reluctantly sits down and explains, drawing a stage and adding important terms for theater-related things to the drawing. As Emma describes theater and how it works to everyone, they get excited and decide to write, direct, and perform a play together. Emma agrees, although with a good bit of skepticism. Moominpappa is the one to write the script, of course, and everyone starts arguing about what the story should be. Mizabel states that she wants her character to die, and Mimble agrees and says that she should be the one to kill her. Chapter 9. This chapter is called About an Unhappy Father, aiming at Snufkin, and I love that. Also, little Mai is so damn tiny in the picture at the top of the page. Every time the book shows her canon size, I just can't help but laugh. Anyway, Snufkin wakes up in the makeshift tent with the kids and see that it is raining. He worries about what to feed them and how to keep them warm so that they won't get sick. He thinks of how nice it will be when he can share the burden with Moomin Mama, which leads to him thinking about Moomin. He thinks about them swimming in the moonlight together, sitting down and talking in a cave afterwards, which sounds oddly romantic. But Snufkin is then snapped out of his thoughts by one of the kids crying because of a nightmare, and then the momentary peace is over. He tries his best to calm the kids, but it doesn't really work. Little Mai advises him to do as her sister usually does, telling the kids he's going to kill them if they don't keep quiet, and then apologize by giving them sweets afterwards. Snufkin asks her if that method really works, and little Mai informs him that it doesn't. Snufkin then wanders miserably in the rain with all the kids, and finally reaches a house. He knocks and it's empty, so he walks in. Luckily, Snufkin manages to find some food for the kids, and so they eat together and warm themselves by the fire. It is revealed that this is indeed Fillyjonk's house. Chapter 10. It is time for the dress rehearsal of Moominpappa's play, and they have a tiny audience watching from boats around the stage. Behind the scenes, however, there is chaos. Everyone is fighting about the storyline, and Moominpappa is fervently trying to rewrite parts of the script. At last, the rehearsal begins, and Moominpappa has a dramatic dialogue in the beginning. It goes okay, with only a few minor slip-ups. However, it escalates from there, as there are wardrobe malfunctions upon prop failures and missed cues, and the audience misinterprets the play. So basically, the dress rehearsal goes really bad. But Moomin Mama assures Moominpappa that Emma told her that for a play to go well, the dress rehearsal has to go terrible, so he's not that worried. Missabel is actually happy because people laughed and applauded her performance. Chapter 11. The theater gang sends out flyers, and one of them reaches the Hamule guarding the jail cell where Moomin, Snork Maiden, and Fillyjonk are currently being held. The flyer states, quote, "The Lion Ladies, or The Bond of Kinship, drama in an act by Moominpappa. Starring Moomin Mama, Moominpappa, Mimble's daughter, Missabel, and Whomper. Choir, Emma. Entrance fee, anything edible. Starts tonight at sunset if it's not windy or raining, and ends at the children's usual bedtime. The play takes place in the middle of Pine Tree Bay. Boats are to be rented by the Hamules, the theater company. The police officer Hamule wants to go to the play, and is eventually convinced by Moomin, Snork Maiden, and Fillyjonk to go see it, and to let his cousin stay and watch them while he's gone. So the Hamule goes away to watch the play and leaves his cousin behind to watch the criminals. The Hamule's cousin is very nervous. She is constantly knitting, glancing at Moomin, Snork Maiden, and Fillyjonk in their cage, and just seems to be kind of terrified of them. Moomin kindly asks her what she is knitting, and she replies that she does not know. The gang advises her that she should knit socks, since there are many people with cold feet. They then pretend to be sick and convince the cousin that if she doesn't let them out and give them tea, they will die. The cousin reluctantly lets them out and invites them into her house, where she gives them tea. During the tea time, they all become friends and decide to go to the theater together. Chapter 12. A flyer arrives at Fillyjonk's house, where Snufkin and his children are currently living. The children rip the flyer apart in excitement, so Snufkin has to puzzle the pieces together to read it, and is able to read that there will be a theater at sundown at Pine Bay, but not who the actors are. He decides to take the kids to see the play, since they seem excited about it. He washes the kids up and walks with them to the theater. The kids give Snufkin a gift, a tobacco pouch that they've made themselves, and he thanks them. As the play progresses, Snufkin realizes that little Mai's sister is on stage and recognizes her as his own sister, Mimble. Therefore, he understands that little Mai is in fact his sister too, and that he just didn't recognize her. He also realizes that Moomin Mama and Moominpappa are in the play and is surprised that Moomin isn't present. A cute detail is that every time something bad happens to Mimble's character on stage, little Mai gets super angry. So when a lion chases her in the play, little Mai literally runs up on stage and bites the lion in the leg, which shows that she does love her sister no matter how annoying she can be towards her. Anyway, because of this, the play kind of escalates, and Mimble stops acting since she's so happy to see her sister again. So Snufkin just rows his boat over to the stage and says hi to the Moomin family, dropping off the forest kids with Moomin Mama for like a moment of relief. Now, in the midst of all of this chaos, Moomin, Snork Maiden, Fillyjonk, and the police's cousin make themselves known. Moomin Mama is very happy to see them, but quickly notices that the police, who is there to watch the play, starts chasing them, and so she tells them to flee. While all of this is happening, the rest of the audience assumes that it's all part of the play, so they're like cheering and clapping and stuff. The police also happens to catch sight of Snufkin and tries to take him too, but right then Emma starts this spinning circle on the stage, you know, the kind like the one in Hamilton. So the chaos worsens even further, and so Snufkin gets away with his boat. Now the audience is like going crazy and applauding because they think this is the big finish. And in the midst of everything, Moomin, Snork Maiden, Fillyjonk, and the Hamule's cousin falls off of their boat in the commotion. Now, everyone except Moomin swims towards the theater to get up on stage, but Moomin has caught sight of Snufkin and swims to his boat instead. Moomin tells Snufkin that he's very happy to see him as he climbs on board, and they escape the police and the chaos by the stage together. Chapter 13. Snufkin rows them away in silence, and there is another really sussy moment. God, I'm probably the only fucking person who still says sussy in 2025 anyway. It's kind of hard to describe, so I'll just translate it and quote it. Quote, Moomintroll looked at the homely profile of his old hat against the night sky, and at the puffs of pipe smoke that rose into the calm air. Now everything is going to be good, he thought. End quote. I don't know, I just thought it was kind of queer-coded how he just looked at him in the longing way like that. At least that's how I imagine it. Maybe that's just me. Anyway, once they reach shore, Snufkin tells Moomin to run and get his family and bring them back to the boat, and Moomin does as told. Once everyone returns, Snufkin rows them all back to Moominvalley, and Moomin reminisces on the fact that the forest kids are going to miss Snufkin, even calling them Snufkin's children. After a while, the water becomes too shallow to go by boat, so they start wading through the water. When they're almost there, however, they are surrounded by Hamule police, who clearly wants to arrest Snufkin. The Hamule's cousin steps forward and lies that Snufkin is very remorseful and manages to convince him to let him go. So, they finally reach the house, who isn't submerged anymore, and are very relieved to see that nothing is too terribly damaged. As everyone makes themselves at home again, Moomin goes down to Snufkin's usual camping spot where he is smoking his pipe. He sits down beside him and they have a brief conversation about the new tobacco Snufkin got from his children before Moomin says goodnight and goes to search for the boat Moominmamma made him in the beginning of the book. He finds it and is overjoyed. He shows Moominmamma, who is also very happy. The end. Now, my thoughts about this book is this is definitely my favorite Moomin book out of this series. Obviously, because I love this series, I have a lot of them that I do like, and I think I've already said on the few past ones, I've been like, this is one of my favorite, but this one in particular is my very favorite. I don't know, I just love the storyline and the magical landscapes that are both described and illustrated, and just the thought of everything being submerged in water and the idea of hosting a play on water. I just love it. And I also love all the moments between Snufkin and Moomin and the brief chapter of fatherhood in Snufkin's life. Also, I'm obviously in love with the fact that little Mai is heavily featured in this book as well. I feel like you really get to know her as a character this book, and it just, I don't know, I love it. The next book we're going to be talking about is Moominland in Winter. Now, this book also begins with a map showing Moominvalley during the winter. Chapter 1. It is described how winter is covering Moominvalley in deep snow and the Moomin house is snowed in. The Moomin family is sleeping by the biggest fireplace in the house, as they always hibernate between November and April, as their ancestors have always done. Moomin accidentally wakes up, however, and can't go back to sleep. He walks around the dusty, quiet house, feeling uneasy and alone. He also sees a pair of eyes underneath the sink that kind of freaks him out. He decides to read the note Snufkin always leaves him each fall when he leaves. The letter says, "Sleep well and don't be sad. I'll be there again on the first warm day of spring. Wait for me before building the dam. Snufkin." Moomin decides to venture out to explore and possibly find Snufkin, but the doors are jammed, so he climbs up to the roof, falling into the snow below. Interestingly enough, it is described how his skin is sensitive to cold, but that he, in that moment, starts an evolution for Moomintrolls, where their skin will eventually be thick enough to be suited for winter, so they no longer have to hibernate. This was really interesting to me because, Moomin biology and stuff. He ventures out into the snowy forest. Chapter 2. We get to follow a squirrel who is searching for a new mattress out in the winter cold. It finds a box in a cave with cotton in it and starts collecting it, but is bitten in the leg. Turns out Little Mai and her sister are sleeping in the box, and Little Mai is annoyed that she's been woken up, but she makes the best of it and starts playing in the ice and snow. We cut to Moomin, who is wandering through the forest. He looks at the mountains and thinks about Snufkin, thinking to himself that if Snufkin only knew he was coming, he would climb the mountains for him, but that it would be too dangerous alone. He finds a snow lantern and a person laying down in the snow whistling. This turns out to be Tutiki, and Moomin sits down with her as they watch the northern lights in the sky together. Tutiki takes him to Moominpappa's bathhouse, where she resides during the winter. He is served hot soup poured by invisible shrews. He's told that he cannot open the door to a certain cabinet in the bathhouse, which makes him grumpy. He goes home to the house again to sleep. Meanwhile, Little Mai is grumpy in her cave. The box has broken, the cotton is everywhere, and her sister won't wake up from her sleep. She goes outside and skates on the ice, discovering the way to the Moomin house and running in its direction, hoping to find a cozy blanket there. Chapter 3. Moomin feels very alone in the Moomin house and is disturbed that the sun never shows itself. The sky is always gray and boring, and it makes him depressed. And I gotta say, as a Nordic person, going through a very shitty winter right now with barely any snow and a bunch of rain and stuff, this is very relatable. The sky is very gray and boring right now. Anyway, he discovers that a lot of things that are usually present in the Moomin house are missing, and goes outside again to ask Tutiki about it. Outside the house, someone has made a horse out of snow, and it has mirrors for eyes, which scares him. And I gotta say, I get it. It's very creepy. Tutiki is sitting on the bridge, singing about the snow horse she has made. She tells Moomin that if they pour water on the horse, it's going to freeze and gallop away. Moomin is very angry and sad about all the changes that winter has brought, and sings an angry summer song about how much winter sucks. Little Mai suddenly comes riding down a hill on the family's silver tray that Moomin noticed was stolen earlier, and knocks him into the snow. In the afternoon, Tutiki warns them of a certain big cold that is going to come at night when the cold sets in. She warns the squirrel from earlier to stay inside when the sun goes down, and tells them that the big cold is very beautiful but also very dangerous. At night, Moomin goes to the bathhouse with Tutiki, and they talk about all the small creatures that are hiding during the winter. The big cold, or the Lady of the Cold as she's also called, comes. They all huddle around the fireplace until she has passed. They notice, however, that the squirrel has forgotten to go inside. The Lady of the Snow walks up to it, strokes it behind the ear, and walks on, and it falls down stiff and frozen. Tutiki brings it to the bathhouse, and they all try to warm it. Moomin is really sad and upset, but Little Mai simply remarks that its tail will make a great fur muff. They decide to bury the squirrel the next day, but Little Mai isn't sad. She remarks that she can only be happy and angry, which I find kind of iconic. The snow horse comes alive, just as Tutiki promised, and they put the squirrel on its back, and it rides away with it into the horizon. Chapter 4. A few days after the funeral, Moomin notices that some stuff is missing again. This time it's Tutiki. She has stolen some wood and old furniture to make a big bonfire. Moomin can feel the presence of creatures all around him, but he can't see them. When the bonfire is lit, however, he can see the creatures' shadows. The Grow comes and everyone flees. She sits down on the bonfire to try and warm herself, but accidentally puts it out, as she always does. Moomin is upset that the sun still hasn't shown itself and confronts Tutiki, who is fishing underneath the ice. She tells him to be patient. Right as the sun goes down, however, it peeks through a crack in the clouds, and Moomin is overjoyed to see the sun. And again, I don't know if you guys care about my little fun fact about the Nordic countries here, but this is a very common occurrence in the Nordic countries, or at least in Sweden where I live. We don't get much sun at all during the winter. For example, in November 2023, Stockholm had only 20 hours of sun for the entire month, so not even 1 hour per day. So on the rare occasions that we see the sun during the winter, everyone is like overjoyed and just kind of runs out of their hiding spots and just like sits in the sun, and it's really funny. Anyway, the sun goes down and it gets dark again, and Moomin feels tricked since he only saw the sun for just a moment. In a fit of rage, he goes into the bathhouse and opens the forbidden door. Inside is a small furry creature that instantly escapes the bathhouse. Tutiki comes in and explains to him that the creature is his forefather, so basically what Homo erectus is to us. Moomin goes home to contemplate, only to discover that the forefather has crawled up to the chandelier in the Moomin house lounge and watches as it crawls behind the fireplace. Chapter 5. Every day the sun starts rising higher, and on the day where it starts peeking through the clouds, a tiny dog arrives at the Moomin house. Moomin and little Mai welcomes it and gives it access to the basement with jam in it. A bunch of people show up, and Moomintroll invites them in, even digging out the door from the snow. A mule with a big horn appears on a pair of skis. He makes everyone build him a house out of snow and takes a bath in the frozen lake. Moomin warns Tutiki of the guy, and she winces, seemingly having met similar annoying mules earlier. The mule is a general nuisance, forcing people to do stuff for him, eating all the food, and pressuring Moomin into skiing. The tiny dog that I mentioned earlier is called Sorry Oo, and he keeps wanting to go to the wolves he hears at night, despite the dangers of it. Moomin walks into a snowstorm and finally embraces the winter around him, but is picked up by Tutiki, who informs him that one of his house guests, a toffel called Salome, has disappeared. The mule ends up finding her in the snow and brings her home. At night, Sorry Oo listens to the wolves as usual. He howls at them, and to his surprise, they howl back. This leads him to walking into the forest in the middle of the night, searching for them. When the wolves surround him, however, he realizes his mistakes. The wolves aren't friendly, they view him as food. However, the mule saves him, and all is good. Chapter 6. Spring is coming, and the guests leave, and Tutiki turns her hat inside out, a small spring tradition of hers. Moomin, who has finally gotten used to the winter, is disappointed that spring is coming so early. Tutiki is cleaning the bathhouse, Moomin is getting the house ready for when his family wakes up, and little Mai is ice skating. Eventually, however, the ice cracks while little Mai is on it, which excites her, of course. She skates around as the ocean breaks loose around her. Moomin tries to rescue her, but falls into the water himself and gets angry and flustered. He goes back to the Moomin house. On his way home, he meets the squirrel that they had a funeral for and realizes that he somehow isn't dead. So, no use crying over that squirrel anymore, in case you were sad. Moomin gets sick from the cold and sneezes, which finally wakes Moomin Mama up. She immediately gets up to make him a warm drink. When Moomin is feeling better, he excitedly tells his mother about winter and everything related to it. The next day, the whole family wakes up. Snork Maiden greets Moomin happily, and Tutiki plays her barrel organ, and Moomin thinks about the fact that Snufkin will soon return to him. The end. Now, my thoughts about this book is that I like it. I think it's good that there is a whole book dedicated to Moomin discovering the winter, and that the removal of most of the main cast results in us meeting new characters. I think it's a great way to explore the world and do some world building and kind of introduce us to some other creatures that maybe won't mean that much to the overall story, but kind of gives us a view of like how the world looks around them, if that makes sense. Now, personally, none of these new characters aside from Tutiki really interest me that much, so like this book isn't my personal favorite. That doesn't mean that I think it's bad or anything, it's just not as entertaining as the other books, in my opinion. Like, that's obviously just personal taste and not that the book is like written badly or anything. It's just my personal opinion. The next book is Tales from Moominvalley. Now, this book is kind of different from the other books since it doesn't actually have a cohesive plot. Instead, it's a compilation of a bunch of small stories from Moominvalley, largely centering around side characters rather than the main cast that we are used to. Now, I'm going to state my opinion after each short story, and then I'll summarize my overall thoughts at the end of the book as usual. So it starts with a map over Moominvalley, and curiously, it's the same map that was present in Midsummer Madness. I don't know why this is, if one of the stories are supposed to take place during, like, the same time as that book or something. I don't really know, but that's the map anyway. The first story is called The Spring Song. The story starts with Snufkin being on his way home for spring. He ponders over what this year's spring song should be as he plays a new one each year on his harmonica. He wants it to be good enough to impress Moomin when he gets back. At night, as Snufkin sits by the fire, a tiny creature appears and wants to hang out with him. Snufkin is kind of pissed because he needed solitude to come up with a good spring song. The tiny creature wants a name, and although Snufkin is annoyed at first, he takes pity and names the creature Titi Woo, with a happy beginning and a sad ending. Snufkin continues his walk back towards Moominvalley, but feels bad because of how he treated Titi Woo. So he turns back to apologize. They meet up, have a friendly conversation, and then Snufkin leaves again, stating that he has to see Moomintroll since he has actually begun missing him a little. Now, my opinions. I think this story is really sweet. I like how Snufkin keeps his feelings of solitude that he needs, meanwhile accepting the fact that the routine he has created around the spring song doesn't need to be the same every year. Like, he kind of realizes that he has to be open to change a little bit, and I think that's a good lesson to teach children and, well, adults alike. The next story is called A Terrible Story. It is about a Whomper and his little brother. Now, the Whomper and his little brother is playing around in a bog, and the Whomper pretends that his little brother has fallen into a hole and gotten swallowed by snakes. He runs in to tell his parents, who get scared for a second but then angry because, well, he lied. The Whomper goes outside again, pondering about all the horrible stuff that could potentially happen to his little brother. Eventually, he sees a little house and goes inside to explore. There, he finds little Mai curled up on the top of a dresser. She scares him with horrible stories. Turns out the house belongs to little Mai's grandmother. There is a knock on the door, and she opens it, revealing the Whomper's dad, who is looking for his son. They go home together, and the Whomper tells his dad of how horrible little Mai is. Now, my opinions on this story, personally, I didn't really care that much for this one, other than the little Mai cameo and getting to see her grandmother, who hasn't been mentioned previously. But again, that's obviously a personal preference just because I love little Mai. The next story is called The Fillyjonk Who Believed in Catastrophes. This story is about a fillyjonk. She is washing carpets in the ocean, muttering about an upcoming catastrophe of some sort. Now, she recently moved into a new house, so she's trying to organize the inside in a suitable way, but it's not going so great. Fillyjonk's acquaintance Gafsy is coming over, and she welcomes her in for tea. Fillyjonk is noticeably anxious the entire time they drink tea and tells Gafsy about the upcoming mysterious disaster. She tells her that she can feel it somehow and that the calm that is currently around them is unnatural. Gafsi is uncomfortable with Filiong's behavior and conspiracies, so she leaves early in a bad mood. Gafsi later calls her to check up on her, asking if any of the disasters she speaks of has ever happened, and Filiong confirms that no, they haven't, but that it's always felt as if a disaster is going to strike. Filiong's thoughts about disasters and her anxiety intensifies, sending her into an anxious spiral. At night, the wind does pick up, and there's a storm outside, solidifying Filiong's fears. The window blows open, and everything in the house turns into a windy disaster. The Filiong walks outside into the storm, leaving the rapidly breaking house behind her. She suddenly feels oddly calm. There's nothing to worry about anymore, seeing as the storm has finally arrived. The day after, Filiong has barely had time to assess the damages done to her house when a tornado appears. The tornado completely ruins her house this time, but all she can feel is relief as the responsibility to keep up a clean, perfect home is washed away. Happy, she plays in the ocean. Gafsi comes to visit her once the storm dies down, taking pity on her, but Filiong is happy and does not need her pity. My opinions on this story is that I loved it personally. I don't know exactly what Tove Jansson's intention was when she wrote it, obviously, but my personal interpretation is that this is a story about anxiety and self-doubt and desperately trying to keep up appearances for others and to pretend to feel good when you're not feeling good. And then eventually it doesn't work anymore and you just have to let it out one way or another, no matter what others feel about it. I think it's a very important and powerful message, and I don't know, I just love the way the message was delivered, you know? The next story is called The Story of the Last Dragon in the World. This story is about Moomin and how he manages to capture a small dragon in a jar. Moomin hides the jar from little Mai, who tries to see what's in the jar. Moomin rushes up with the jar to his room, locks the door, and lets the dragon fly free. The dragon can spit fire and fly and isn't happy with being held captive. Moomin goes downstairs to eat breakfast, and little Mai continues to nag him about his secret at the table. Everyone finds out that he is hiding some kind of creature, and Moomin gets angry and goes down to visit Snufkin by his tent. Moomin tells Snufkin about his dragon. Snufkin sees that he's excited about it and so pretends not to believe him to get him even more hyped, which I thought was cute. Moomin shows Snufkin the dragon, but it turns out that the little creature dislikes Moomin and loves Snufkin. This makes Moomin more than a little disheartened. The dragon hisses at everyone but Snufkin, and Moomin gets sad and goes upstairs to his room. Snufkin doesn't dislike the dragon, but he doesn't like that it's making Moomin sad. As he's fishing by the river, a Hamule floats by in a boat. Snufkin asks the Hamule if he's going far, and the Hamule confirms that he will go rather far. Snufkin then puts the sleeping dragon in his hat and gives it to the Hamule, instructing him to drop the dragon off at some beautiful place that is full of flies for it to eat. When Moomin comes down to his tent later that night, Snufkin lies and tells him that the dragon took off on its own and that it never came to him after Moomin let it out. This makes Moomin happy, and they sit and fish together. Now, I like this story as well. It's very short and cute and very much like a slice of life, kind of like the story with the Whomper. The next story is The Hamule That Loved Silence. This story is about a Hamule that works at a theme park. He doesn't like his job and is rather miserable with all the people and the noise. He has a large family that is also loud and excited, and they don't understand him. One day it rains terribly and the theme park is washed away. The children are sad and crying. The mule finally admits to his family that he wants some peace and quiet, and they laugh at him but gives him an old abandoned family park that no one is using so that he can be on his own. The mule finally feels free. In the morning, however, he is greeted by a small whomper who has been sent by his family with some food. The whomper explains that he and a bunch of others are miserable because of the ruined theme park. He admits, however, that him and a few others have salvaged as much as possible from the park in an attempt to save it. The mule is mortified by the thought of working there again. The mule goes about his day, but eventually discovers a note with his food, stating that he is so nice and beloved by the kids that they want to play with him. They've put all the stuff from the theme park outside of his park. The mule tries to ignore it, but gives up after a while and starts assembling all the theme park stuff into his park. He reluctantly admits to himself that he's having fun doing it. The park is eventually back up and running, but the children are having fun in silence since the mule told them to quiet down. This helps the mule realize that he does miss their laughs, and realizes that he has no real issue running a theme park, only now he can run it on his own terms. I thought this was a sweet story of someone who simply needed to get away from their life for a moment to enjoy it again. I like these little stories because usually they have little woven in messages that are easy to relate to. I personally enjoy this one since I love being at home to the point where I sometimes feel cooped up. In those instances, going out to do something, even if it's just like a walk or, full on going on vacation or just like staying over somewhere else, always helps me, and then I can enjoy home again. So this story really resonated with me. Now, the next story is a story that is very well known within the Moomin fandom, and it is the story of the invisible child. So, this is a story about an invisible child named Ninny. The Moomin family is cleaning mushrooms they've harvested when Tutiki arrives with this invisible, mysterious child. Tutiki explains that Ninny used to live with an old relative who was very mean to her, which eventually turned her invisible. She brought Ninny to the Moomin house with the hope that the Moomin family would be able to make her visible again. Ninny has a bell tied around her neck so that they can hear where she is. Moomin Mama tucks Ninny into bed and goes downstairs, finding a recipe in her grandma's book of home remedies that should be able to turn Ninny visible again. The following morning, when Ninny walks downstairs for breakfast, her paws or feet are visible. Moomin Mama reveals to Moomin that she put some of the house remedy in Ninny's morning coffee. The family and Ninny picks up apples from the ground in the yard, and Ninny accidentally drops and breaks a jar. Her feet quickly fade away again until Moomin Mama assures her that it's no big deal and they come back. Ninny gets more and more visible as the day progresses and gets a new dress from Moomin Mama. The following morning, everything but her head is visible and she can actually speak in shorter sentences. Moomin and Little Mai tries to get her to play, but she's not great at it, so Little Mai gets really mad. The days go by and Ninny's head stays invisible. The family goes down to the beach and Ninny joins them. Moominpappa is planning on pranking Moomin Mama by shoving her into the ocean, but this upsets Ninny so bad that she bites him in his tail. The sudden flare of motion makes all of Ninny visible, and she turns out to be a cute girl with red hair. Moominpappa falls into the water and she laughs at him. Now, my opinions on this is that this is definitely my favorite story out of all of them, and I don't think I'm alone in that. I love Ninny as a character, and I just love the found family trope that this obviously kind of falls into. Just a small warning here, I will briefly touch upon the subject of child abuse, very briefly again, but if you don't want to hear about that, then skip ahead like half a minute or a minute or so. I also appreciate the metaphor of abused and neglected children turning quote-unquote invisible to try and blend in and avoid harm. I think this is an important thing to teach children and adults alike, that some people that blend into the background and try to make themselves small need to be seen and cared for. And also that it needs to happen in their own pace and on their own accord. Now the next story is The Hattefattener's Secret. This is a story of a time when Moominpappa went on a solo adventure away from home and discovered the secret of the Hattefatteners. Moominpappa is fascinated by the Hattefatteners' culture and mystique, so one afternoon he walks down to the shore and spots a few Hattefatteners in a boat. They come toward him and he explains to them that he wants to join them. They bow to him, accepting his request, and he boards their boat and they sail away. They reach a small island and the Hattefatteners walk upon it and perform a curious ritual that Moominpappa doesn't understand. The island is filled with tiny red spiders, which I hate that, and they crawl everywhere, which makes Moominpappa understandably very uncomfortable. Moominpappa tries to converse with the Hattefatteners, but discovers that he and the Hattefatteners communicate in different ways, and he can't understand their way of communicating, so they just can't speak to each other. They continue traveling around to several smaller islands and encounter a sea snake. Eventually, they join a bunch of other Hattefatteners in boats, all going towards the same big island. They step ashore the island and a great storm rolls in over them. The Hattefatteners begin performing a mass ritual, seemingly being charged by the storm's electricity. Moominpappa realizes that he's not a Hattefattener and that their way of life just isn't his style. This helps him long for normal life again, and he sails home satisfied with his adventure. Now, my opinion on this is that I feel that this is kind of on theme with the exploits of Moominpappa, where he mentions running away with Hattefatteners. And it's kind of fun that we get to take part of that story. And I also feel like it embodies a similar message as The Mule That Loved Silence did, that sometimes you just need a break from everyday life to be able to enjoy it again. The next story is called Cedric. It is a story about Snufkin, Sniff, and a plushie called Cedric. Now, Cedric is a small, worn plush dog with topaz eyes. It is explained how Sniff was somehow convinced to give it away and how sad he is about it, but the context for this isn't yet explained. Sniff can't sleep at night due to how sad he is, and so he goes to Snufkin by his tent. Snufkin tells him a story to try and make him feel better. The story is about his mother's aunt who owns a lot of stuff. One day she swallows a bone and goes to the doctor. The doctor tells the aunt that she has only weeks left to live because the bone won't move, which makes her reflect on her life and realize that all the stuff she owns doesn't make her happy. So she gives all her stuff away, which makes a lot of other people happy, which then makes her happy in return. She makes a lot of new friends, which makes her laugh so hard that the bone flies out of her throat. Now, Sniff completely misses the point of this story and worries about the aunt's missing belongings instead of embodying the message that friendship is worth more than material things. So the story ends with Sniff getting Cedric back, except he's missing his topaz eyes. But Sniff still loves him anyway, which the book literally states, like, that kind of redeems him a little bit, right? And I mean, my opinions about this, it was a really cute story. Again, I feel like this one is a little bit of like a slice of life with a light message. And I like how it shows Sniff's character in a really clear way, and that he keeps being greedy and that no one can ever properly take that from him, no matter how hard they try. And I don't know, I just kind of like characters that are annoying or evil or something for no reason, and they just keep being that way no matter how people try to change them. It's kind of refreshing to see somehow. Now, the last story in this book is called The Spruce Tree. And it's about, a spruce tree. We follow a Hamule who is working hard preparing for Christmas in the Moomin house while the family is sleeping. The Hamule is upset as the preparations aren't going well, and the Moomin family wakes up afraid of this unknown thing called Christmas. They're informed by the Hamule's aunt that they need a spruce tree, but they don't know why, only that it should be decorated. The Moomin family chops down a spruce tree and plants it in the snow in their front yard, decorating it with stuff like necklaces and seashells. They're then further informed that Christmas requires food, and they start feeling nervous about this potential creature and its appetite, because again, they don't know what Christmas is, so they kind of assume it's some sort of monster or something. The family is finally told that Christmas needs gifts, so they wrap up some of their belongings in paper. The Moomin family then hides and wait for this Christmas creature, but no one shows except some tiny creatures eating the food and enjoying the festivities. The Moomin family eventually tires of waiting for this creature and just decide that, no, we're going back to sleep. So they go back into hibernation, and all the little creatures get to enjoy food and gifts provided by them. Now, I'm going to state my opinion on this final story and then my overall opinion about this book. I like this story as a finish for the book. It's cozy and lighthearted and feels like a perfect embodiment of what the Moomin family is: open, welcoming, warm, and generous. Now, for the whole book, overall, I like this book a lot. As previously mentioned, I personally prefer the books with continuous storylines and stuff surrounding more like the main characters, but this was definitely a nice breather, and the stories were really cute and bite-sized. So yeah, I enjoyed this book. The next book is Moominpappa at Sea. Just like the other books, this book starts with a map, except this time the map isn't depicting Moominvalley. It is instead a picture of an island with a lighthouse on it, titled The Island and Gulf of Finland. Chapter 1: The Family in the Glass Globe. It's August in Moominvalley, and Moominpappa is restless and worried about potential forest fires due to the heat and drought. Moominpappa falls asleep, but is awoken by his family after a while. They announce that there was in fact a small fire in the moss in the yard, but that it was taken care of. Moominpappa is mad because they didn't wake him up during the fire instead. The whole situation gets him sad since, he's dramatic. So at night he goes down to look at his glass globe. It is explained that he always does so when he's sad. He sees his family reflected in the globe going about life. Eventually, Moomin Mama lights a lamp on the porch for the first time of the year, seeing as the nights are getting darker. The family gathers on the porch for tea and sandwiches. The Groke is spying on them from the dark, attracted to the light coming from the lamp. She scares the Moomin family off, and they put out the light and go into hiding. Moominpappa is then upset again, and Moomin Mama looks at his map and at an island that is marked out on it. She mumbles about starting over and maybe moving there. Chapter 2: The Lighthouse. The Moomin family decides, suddenly, to move from Moominvalley to the little island with a lighthouse marked on Moominpappa's map. They pack a bunch of stuff and board their boat, the Adventure. The Groke appears at the Moomin house once again once darkness starts setting in, but there's no lamp tonight. and she can see the key hung beside the door, understanding that there would be no lamp for a long time. The Groke turns towards the ocean and sees the light from the Moomin family's boat. She follows them. On board the boat, Moomin asks his mother questions about the Groke. She informs him that the Groke doesn't want warmth, and that she just wants to put things out, and that she's not worth talking to. Moomin Mama is slightly tired and irritable, and so she goes to sleep. A while later, when the family wakes up again, Moominpappa is pondering about why he can't see the light of the lighthouse yet. They meet a fisherman and ask him questions, but he merely tells them to turn around again and return home. The family finally arrives at the island, and the lighthouse is turned off. Moomin Mama has a weird feeling and finds it hard to get used to everything, and they camp down at the beach for the night. In the morning, the family walks up to the lighthouse. However, it's locked, and the key is missing. This upsets Moominpappa so bad that he takes a nap, and Moomin goes exploring the island. During Moomin's explorations, he finds a tiny house that is hanging off a cliff wall, held up by wire. He discovers the man they met on the ocean, the fisherman, and asks him about the key to the lighthouse. The man says he lives on the island, but only when it's stormy, and that he doesn't know anything about a key. Moomintroll continues down the beach, where he finds an unusually tiny horseshoe belonging to a so-called seahorse, except it's literally a horse that lives in the sea and not a usual seahorse. I can put a picture on screen of what a Moomin world seahorse looks like. Meanwhile, Moominpappa walks around the island and accidentally comes across the lighthouse keeper's key. He thinks it's destiny, because of course he does, and brings it back to the lighthouse. They open the lighthouse, and it is very tall, dirty, and empty, with a single floor up the stairs. Moomin Mama goes out searching for dirt to make a garden and finds seaweed, which she arranges for the garden. Moominpappa tries to light the lighthouse, but it doesn't work, which upsets him greatly. The Moomin family then tries their best to settle into their new house. Chapter 3: West Wind. Moomintroll finds a cozy hiding spot by some small trees, but gets bitten by ants. He tries to get some sympathy from the rest of the family, but everyone is busy settling in. Little Mai tells him she'll take care of it, though. Moominpappa finds a deep pool of water and is excited about it, thinking that there might be huge fish in there. At night, Moomin and Moominpappa places a net in the ocean, trying to catch some fish to eat. Later, Moomin is awoken from a sound on the beach. He goes down to the water to check and sees the water horses that were mentioned earlier. Moomin thinks they are very beautiful, dancing on the water in front of him. They disappear, and Moomin lights a lantern and hopes that they'll come back. However, instead, the Groke appears. Moomin slowly backs away, puts the lantern out, and walks back to the lighthouse to sleep. Chapter 4: The Northeast. Rain starts falling over the island, and Moominpappa finds a bunch of the old lighthouse keeper's notes scribbled over the walls of the light room. Moomin and his dad check the fishing nets, but the boat is hard to steer due to the weather, and there's no fish in the net, only seaweed. At night, the Groke wails for the lantern, but Moomin doesn't oblige. A few days later, Moomin Mama discovers that all the seaweed she has placed for her garden is gone, since she placed it too close to the water and it has all washed away. Moomin goes back to his hiding place and sees that all the ants have been taken care of, aka murdered by Little Mai. Moomin is kind of sad about it, but Little Mai tells him that he can only blame himself, since she did tell him she was going to take care of it, and that he definitely knew exactly what that meant. The days continue floating by in a very depressing manner. Nothing is going as planned. The fishing nets remain full of seaweed, and the light in the lighthouse won't turn on. Moominpappa goes out fishing with a rod since food is rapidly running out, and meets the fisherman. He He asks some questions about the former lighthouse keeper, but doesn't receive an answer. This makes Moominpappa so angry that he manages to catch a big pike that he brings home to his family. Now, unfortunately, this leads to Moominpappa becoming obsessed with fishing, and soon the lighthouse is full of salted fish. Meanwhile, Moomin Mama is restless, arranging her seaweed garden and dreaming of the flowers that might bloom in spring. She draws them on the windowsill. Little Mai starts hanging out with the fishermen. They don't really speak, they just hang out in silence. Moomin walks down to the shore every night with a lantern for the Groke. He isn't scared of her anymore. He merely shows her the lantern and then puts it out, both of them heading in different directions. She has gotten more and more comfortable with him, and each night she comes closer. The seahorses appear again, and Moomin tells them he has their shoe. They laugh at him and tells him they'll come back another night for it. The night after, the seahorses doesn't show themselves. Instead, Moomin is greeted by the Groke again. He yells at her that he doesn't have the lantern and that he wants her to leave. He runs to the lighthouse again, the Groke wailing behind him. Chapter 5. Fog. Moomin Mama makes a comment about how she doesn't know where to put all the fish anymore, and this of course upsets Moominpappa so bad he has to take a walk. On the walk, Moominpappa meets little Mai, who makes a comment that makes him revalue the situation. He decides to do something new instead of fishing. Moominpappa decides to explore the deep pool of water on the island, and this makes Moomin Mama very happy. Meanwhile, Moomin is laying in his hiding spot and thinking about the seahorses. Moomin Mama finds a bunch of seashells on the island to her delight and shows them to Moominpappa. Little does she know, however, that the seashells have been collected by Moomin. He found them on a box left by the lighthouse keeper and pried the seashells off and left them for her to find, that's so cute. Moomin finds little Mai in a thicket with a bunch of tiny crosses. Little Mai explains that they mark small bird graves that the lighthouse keeper must have left. She explains that birds are drawn to light, and so they must have flown into the light of the lighthouse and died. At night, Moomin encounters one of the seahorses. He praises her and showers her with gifts, but she merely laughs and struts away again. The Groke once again follows him as he makes his way back to the lighthouse, and she annoys him. He does feel sorry for her, but at the same time he feels burdened by her presence. He makes up a story in his head as he tries to sleep, one where he's a hero who rescues seahorses and impresses his friends. The Moomin family continues to settle as it dawns on them that life has indeed changed. Moominpappa is occupied with keeping up with the days by drawing crosses on his calendar. Moomin is worried about the seahorses and the island, and Moomin Mama is drawing flowers on the wall. Chapter 6. The Moon Below. Life continues on the island. Moomin Mama misses home, and Moomin has started sleeping outside, setting down a lit lantern for the Groke each night. Moominpappa's puddle starts breathing. The water is rising and sinking. The island feels restless, and so does the Moomin family. They decide to go on a short expedition, despite the rainy and windy weather. They end up on a big rock in the ocean and have a picnic in the rain. They enjoy the time spent together despite the weather as a welcome break from everything on the island. The following day, Moomin Mama finds herself missing Moominvalley again, and so decides to start painting the walls. She paints flowers and objects that she misses back in Moominvalley. This makes her happy again. Moomin meets the two seahorses at the beach, but can't tell which one he gave gifts to. They tease him and laugh at him, and it makes him sad. Moomin Mama's painting starts looking more and more like Moominvalley, and one night she starts missing it so bad that she steps into the painting and disappears. The rest of the family comes home, wondering where she is. Moomin Mama watches them from within the painting and falls asleep in her painted garden. Chapter 7. The Southwest. Moomin and Moominpappa search for Moomin Mama all over the island, but discovers that she's back at the lighthouse again when they get back. Moomin decides to show his mother his secret hiding spot, and they sneak out with a lantern once Moominpappa has gone to sleep. Moomin confides his issues with the seahorses to Moominmamma, who advises him that seahorses are beautiful to look at, but not very good to keep as friends. He agrees. In the morning, Moomin wakes up in his hiding spot, only to find that it has completely changed during the night. All the roots and trees and rocks have moved, and his space is ruined. He finds little Mai, who makes it very clear that she knows it's because of the growk. The island is scared and moving away from her. Moomin pretends not to know what she's talking about. Moominpappa keeps trying to find out the depth of his mysterious pool of water, and Moominmamma has begun painting herself into her garden. Now, there's this really cute picture here that I love, and I actually have it, among other pictures from this book, as a motif on a tote bag of mine, and I love this tote bag so much. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Anyway, the Moomin parents notice that the trees have moved and are very worried about it. Moomin is too embarrassed by his little visits with the growk to tell them the truth. He manages to lead his dad into thinking that the ocean is simply alive, and so the trees are fleeing from it because it has bad character. The Moomin family discovers that the fisherman's house has been destroyed by the waves, and Moominpappa and Moomin go to rescue him. They manage to get him out of the broken house and give him some new pants from the lighthouse, which Moominmamma calls home for the first time since they moved there. The fisher changes into the new pants that fit him very well, but refuses to go into the lighthouse with them. Instead, he runs away to be on his own. The family settles in at night, and although they keep finding dead birds and Moomin is worried about the moving trees and rocks, the lighthouse is finally beginning to feel a little more like home. Chapter 8: The Lighthouse Keeper. Moominpappa notices how the island seems to be alive as well, as he sees it move and cower. He also finds out that the fisherman's birthday is tomorrow and tells the family, who agrees that they should throw him a party. A bunch of planks washes ashore from the previous storm, so the family wades into the water and collects them. At night, Moomin starts sketching a small house he's been planning to build for himself, and Moominmamma rests her paw against her painting, realizing that she can't enter it anymore since she no longer misses Moominvalley. She has now found a new home. Moomin goes outside for a walk and sees the growk. He approaches her without the lantern, expecting her to complain about it. However, the growk sings her usual happy song that she usually sings when he brings her the lantern, proving that she's happy to see him, not the lantern, and thus a very unlikely friendship is born. The day after, the trees and rocks of the island has calmed and crawled back to their rightful places. The Moomin family is happy and ready to celebrate the fisherman's birthday. Moominpappa decides to give the fisherman his old iconic top hat as a birthday present, since he's not using it anymore, as he's changed to the old lighthouse keeper's hat. He discovers writing on the wall that reveals that the old lighthouse keeper and the fisherman has the same birthday. Moominpappa finds this odd, but thinks nothing of it. The family prepares a feast out of what little things they have, and though the fisherman is very reluctant to entering the lighthouse, they manage to bring him inside and sit him down. The birthday dinner is beautiful and quiet, and they small talk and eat. After a while, the fisherman reveals that he is in fact the prior lighthouse keeper. They have nice conversations, establish a certain kinship, and at last, the lighthouse keeper goes up to sleep in the light room. Moominpappa goes down to shore together with Moomin, and they watch together as the light in the lighthouse finally turns on. The end. My thoughts on this book is that I love it, but I hate it at the same time. And not to be dramatic, but I think that makes it even better. I personally have trouble handling change, and so the idea of this cozy, comforting, established Moomin family that is very much a comfort thing for me completely uprooting their life and leaving everything and everyone behind so suddenly honestly hurts me a bit. But that's the thing, you know? That's what moving feels like. You uproot your entire life just to build a new one, and it's scary and confusing, but with time you grow new roots and new relationships and you adapt. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I think this book perfectly describes how hard adapting can be and how nice it feels when it finally clicks. I would also like to point out that I love the ocean theme. You can really tell that the ocean meant a lot to Tove Jansson, and I always enjoy seeing artists basing their creations in something they love. The next, and actually the last book we're going to be talking about is Moominvalley in November. Now this is the last book in the book series. And as usual, it starts with a map over Moominvalley. So the book starts with Snufkin waking up in his tent, feeling traces of autumn in the air. He quickly packs up and leaves Moominvalley, beginning his yearly journey. He walks past a Fillyjonk's house and makes sure to be quiet. He doesn't like her way of living, and she doesn't like his, so he doesn't want an altercation. Snufkin briefly thinks about the Moomin family and that he forgot to leave Moomin a goodbye letter, but doesn't think much of it, considering they're always the same and they'll meet again in spring. He passes a village with houses and the boat where the Womper lives. It is explained that the Womper's name is Toft and that he lives in the boat all year round. Every night, Toft tells himself the story of the Moomin family and the beautiful Moominvalley and dreams of going there. We now get to follow the Fillyjonk, who lives in the house that Snufkin passed by. She's cleaning and is currently trying to clean the roof. However, she has slippers on and so slips down the roof. Scared, she manages to scoot back up and stand upright and finally enter the house again through one of the windows on the roof. The Fillyjonk is very shaken up after this, and it kind of sends her into this existential crisis. She sees her house and her belongings through new eyes and realizes she has way too much stuff for a single person and that she is very afraid of dying. She decides to give the Moomin family a visit and seek consolation there. So she packs some stuff and leaves for the Moomin house. We briefly follow Snufkin again as he walks through a rainy forest. He tries to come up with a rain song, but it doesn't work, and so he decides to return to Moominvalley, thinking that he'll be able to find the melody there. We get to follow a Hamule who can't sleep because he's thinking through his life choices, which, relatable. He has worked hard all his life to see to it that people do things right, but nobody ever listens and he ends up not having time for anything else. He wants to head out to sea with his boat, the one the Womper Toft lives in, but he doesn't have time. He remembers the Moomin house where he stayed as a guest a long time ago and how calm he had felt there. Without hesitation, he grabs his toothbrush and starts walking there, despite the rain. He gets to the house and yells for the family to let him in, but nobody answers. It's just quiet. Toft walks from the boat to Moominvalley and reaches the house just like the Hamule did. He meets the Hamule there, who informs him that the Moomin family is gone. They let themselves in and the Hamule makes coffee. The Hamule shows Toft around, telling him about all the knickknacks that the family left behind. Toft gets sad that the Moomin family isn't there and goes outside. He looks into Moominpappa's glass globe and sees a lighthouse, realizing that the family must be very far away. The Hamule is still inside the house and suddenly an old man walks in. We get to see the old man's perspective. He wakes up in the morning, finding that he has forgotten his own name. He decides that his new name is Grandpa Grumble. He packs some belongings, medicine, and food and decides to leave wherever his feet take him. He is drawn to the Moomin house, just like the other lost characters. The Fillyjonk arrives at the Moomin house and immediately notices that it hasn't been cleaned in a while. The curtains are pulled down and the crystal chandelier and all the furniture has been covered. The house is clearly abandoned. She finds Toft and asks him where the Moomin family is, and he replies that he doesn't know. Toft is reading a book, except he doesn't really understand what it's about since it's too complicated for him. After a while, he falls asleep. We change perspective to Mimble, who is on her way to visit her little sister, Little Mai. When she arrives at the Moomin house, she is met with Grandpa Grumble, who is sitting on the front steps. He doesn't know where Little Mai is, so Mimble moves on to the Fillyonk. She tells her that the whole family has up and left, but it doesn't seem to concern Mimble very much. Snufkin finally arrives at the Moomin house and is apprehensive about all the people gathered around it. He greets them and they inform him of the situation. He doesn't like talking with everyone, so he goes down to the bridge and puts his tent up. The Fillyjonk and the Hamule have an argument about who should do the dishes after dinner, and the argument ends in them going separate ways and no dinner being served. Honestly, for the record, I'm on the Fillyonk side here. She was fine cooking and doing dishes, but then the Hamule said she should do so because she's a woman, and then she didn't want to do it anymore, which I think is fully understandable. And the Hamule, this specific Hamule, is now cancelled in my eyes. Like, fuck off, dude, honestly. Anyway, Mimble and Grandpa Grumble have a brief encounter in the kitchen where Mimble tells him about the forefather, which makes him interested. He tries to wake the forefather in the tile stove, but to no avail. He finds a sealed note in there as well, but can't read it since he's not wearing glasses, and so he hides it in a safe space. The next morning, Snufkin wakes up early to make coffee and try to catch the melody he was searching for. However, the Hamule wakes up as well, disturbing his peace. The Fillyjonk lights a fire in the tile stove, forgetting that the forefather lives in there. Grandpa Grumble saves him and expects praise for it. However, no one really cares, and he gets angry. Snufkin is tired in his tent, listening to everything going on outside. He finds himself missing the Moomin family and realizes that they always let him be when he needed it and that he took that for granted. The Hamule paints a sign with the word Moominvalley on it, and it makes Snufkin really angry to the point that he yells at him, since Snufkins generally hate signs and rules and things like that. Snufkin then starts frantically searching to try and find a note from Moomin, any sign that he might have left behind for him. It is described how a Moomintroll never fails to say goodbye, and how Moomin is the only one who knows how to write to a Snufkin. Short, right to the point, and with something to laugh at the end. Snufkin opens a closet in his search, and Fillyjonk is terrified that there might have been bugs living in there that have now crawled out. She yells for Toft, who is also scared, but for another reason. He has been reading all this time and made up a scary creature out of the details from the book. He's scared that the creature has been let out of the closet. Him and Fillyjonk scare each other more and more, meanwhile a thunderstorm is rumbling on outside, further feeding their delusions. The Fillyjonk runs out of the house to hide in Snufkin's tent, but Snufkin convinces her that the house kitchen is safe, just to get rid of her. Grandpa Grumble catches a fish, and Snufkin tells him that the Fillyjonk can cook it, most likely to get rid of him as well. She does cook it, relieved to be doing something familiar, and they all eat together despite complaints and slight arguments. The Hamule walks around the house, staying at the door of Moominpappa's bedroom. Now, interestingly enough, it's described how Moominpappa and Moominmamma sleep in separate rooms, not because they fight or anything, but since Moominmamma wants to be in the east because she likes the morning, and Moominpappa wants to be in the west because the night sky makes him happy. I thought this was really cute, I'm not gonna lie. I know that like couples having separate rooms is kind of a controversial topic, I guess, but I honestly, if that's what you feel like you need, if you need that space, nothing wrong with that. I think that rocks. The Hamule gets the idea to build a tree house for when the Moomin family potentially returns, and happily runs outside to start. Mimble and the Fillyjonk have a brief conversation in the kitchen about Moominmamma and bugs. Grandpa Grumble sees his own reflection in a mirror and thinks it's the forefather. The days go by and everyone does their thing. The Whomper Toft continues to imagine a monster, but has to stop his own imagination when it becomes too scary. The Fillyonk suddenly appears, treating him like a child and trying to take on the role of Moomin Mama. Toft plays along to try and ease the awkwardness of the whole situation. Toft goes into the forest, calling out to the imaginary creature. It scares him, and so he turns to Snufkin's tent, ranting to him about how the Moomin family let him down by leaving. Snufkin explains that the Moomin family most likely only needed a little space and that it's not personal, which makes Toft angry and he leaves. The Fillyonk tries to be spontaneous like Moomin Mama is, but it backfires and a big yelling match breaks out and everything just kind of crumbles. At the end of it, Grandpa Grumble reveals that he has seen a letter, but that he has hidden it in a place he can't remember. Snufkin wants to find it, thinking it must be from Moomin. After some searching, they find the paper, but it's simply a note stating, "Please do not light a fire in the tile stove, because that's where the forefather lives, Moomin Mama." The Fillyonk is basically burned out from trying to be like Moomin Mama and is resting up in her bed. Mimble walks in and actually says something comforting for once, telling her that they should throw a party for Grandpa Grumble and that she should decorate because she's the most artistic one. This makes Fillyonk happy and she immediately starts decorating. Mimble combs Toft's hair and talks about the Moomin family and the fact that they used to go behind the house when they got upset or angry. This makes Toft angry because this version of the Moomin family doesn't match his fantasies of how the Moomin family is supposed to act. He runs away in anger. The Fillyonk continues to prepare for the party, feeling like she's finally found her place in the house. The party is nice. The Fillyonk has made food and hung lanterns, and the Hamule reads a poem. Snufkin plays his harmonica and Mimble dances. Grandpa Grumble introduces the forefather to everyone, or rather his own reflection, and they all pretend for his sake and greets him respectfully. The Fillyonk perform a shadow play for them all, depicting the return of the Moomin family, with accompanying tunes by Snufkin. At the end of the play, however, the candle blows out and everything is dark. Everyone realizes that there is thunder outside, and both Fillyonks and Toft's fears creep back in, making everyone a little unnerved. So the party ends there for the night. Toft goes out into the night to once again confront the creature he's so scared of. It comforts him and he goes back to sleep, just like everyone else. Now the only one who is still awake is the Fillyonk, who picks up Snufkin's harmonica left in the kitchen and plays it in quiet peace until she falls asleep. The morning after, the Fillyonk is doing a thorough house cleaning, and everyone eventually joins in. The day after that, Mimble and Fillyonk leaves the Moomin house for their own homes again, saying goodbye to everyone. Eventually, Grandpa Grumble decides to hibernate and falls asleep in one of the family's wardrobes. Time continues, and the Hamule's treehouse falls down. He doesn't really seem to mind, though. Snufkin and him sail out with his boat finally, but it turns out the Hamule is seasick, and he realizes that sailing just isn't his thing. This realization is what finally sets him off back home again, leaving only Toft and Snufkin left at the house. Eventually, Snufkin leaves as well, and Toft is left all alone. He looks into the glass globe and sees that the Moomin family has hung the lantern in their boat and that they are returning back home for the winter. The book ends with Toft waiting on the wharf by the ocean, waiting to receive the Moomin family. The final sentence of the book is as follows, quote, "And now Toft the Whomper saw the lantern that the dad had hung on the masthead. It had a mild warm color and it burned steadily. The boat was very far away. Toft the Whomper had a lot of time to go down through the forest and follow the beach to the boat wharf, just in time to receive the rope." The end. Now, for my own thoughts, I have mixed feelings about this book. but once again, it's not because I think it's bad. Not at all. I think it's amazing. I have mixed feelings because I love this book, but at the same time, it kind of hurts to read. It just feels so empty, and all the characters seem so lost without the Moomin family, even though they thankfully seem to find themselves in the end. Now, there's different theories surrounding whether the Moomin family actually returned or not, considering that Tove could have easily imagined it or fantasized it, considering that Wompers are known for their big imaginations. However, for my own mental health's sake, I like to pretend like they definitely went back, if not at the point where the book ends, then later, you know? I know that they do return in the 2019 animated series, so I'll just go with that. Another thing I want to say about this book before we finally move on from this incredibly long section is the very sad backstory of why this book is completely devoid of Moomins and why this is the last book in the series. So, long story short, Tove's inspiration for this book was her own mother's death. Obviously a very difficult thing to go through. Now, I myself am lucky enough to have most of my close family and friends alive still, which I'm very thankful for, so I can't really speak on grief or how it feels. However, I can imagine that Tove put a lot of her grief into the book, just based on like the emptiness and lack of comfort that the ever-present Moomin family provides, like the feelings of loss. To me, it just becomes very clear, knowing the backstory of this book, that the basis of its very existence is grief and loss and emptiness of losing someone near. And I think this is why this book is such a mixed bag for me. It's so good, but like it hurts to read, man. And it doesn't help that it was kind of an open ending where you're not sure if the family returns or not. It's a very bittersweet ending to the Moomin book series, and it reflects the author's reality in such like a heart-wrenchingly beautiful way. Yeah. But anyway, I didn't mean to get all emotional and dramatic. I just hope that out of this very long section of the video, you got a good grip of the core Moomin plot, the story and the characters, because finally we are moving on to the next section. Alright, now that we've talked a little bit, or a whole lot actually, about the books and their storyline, hopefully you have a decent picture of who the characters are and kind of the themes and storylines explored in the Moomin franchise. Now, keeping those books in mind, we're going to be talking about the comics. Now, in case you didn't know, Tove made comics for newspapers, and these comics have later been printed into books and stuff like that. So yeah. Now, how did these comics start? During the 1930s, Tove illustrated for a comedy magazine in which she made a creature called Snork and used it as her signature instead of just writing her name. This little creature is what later became Moomin, and obviously she also kept the name Snork for her other characters. Now, the very first Moomin comic was published in the Swedish-speaking Finnish magazine Ny Tid in 1947. The comic strip was commissioned by Otto Virtanen, her then partner, you know, the dude who inspired Snufkin, and good friend who worked as an editor for the magazine. Continually, strips from the story The Moomintroll and the End of the Earth, inspired by the novel Comet in Moominland, was published weekly. It ran for less than a year, though. In 1952, about 5 years later, Tove was contacted by Charles Sutton, head of a British news conglomerate, who asked her to make the Moomin stories into a daily comic strip. Now, worth noting is that by this point, the Moomins were already well known in Britain due to the novels. So, in 1954, the magazine London Evening News became the home of the Moomin comics. Several comic panels were published as teasers in the week or so before the first strip was released, and this kind of helped amp up the anticipation and hype around the Moomin comic. Now, the comic follows the Moomin family on different adventures and poses different questions and ideas in a fun, engaging way. They are partially based on the novels, but they definitely include elements that stray away from the books. So they include some new, unique storylines that were inspired by Tove's own life experiences. It also introduced some new characters into the Moomin universe, including Stinky that was introduced in Moomin and the Brigands in 1954. Now, I couldn't really find a lot of examples online of the comics, but I did conveniently get a Swedish Moomin book that includes some of the comics. So I'll show you some screenshot of those on screen, and hopefully you'll be able to kind of gather-ish what's happening, even if you don't speak Swedish. Basically, the storylines are mostly unique as compared to the books, and from what I've noticed, they also have this kind of cutting edge, I don't know, this like a little more edgy humor than the books have, because I assume that, you know, comics in a newspaper might not be directed at the same audience necessarily. But also interesting to note, one of Tove's younger brothers, Lars, helped her with the comics for the magazine when pressure became too much for her to handle alone. From the beginning, he helped her translate the comics from Swedish to English, but then he went on to help her with the manuscripts as well. The first comic story the siblings created together was Moomin Goes Wild West in 1957. In 1960, Lars took over production of the comics completely, including the illustration, and continued making them until 1975. Now, personally, looking at my book with prints of the comics, some of my favorite moments in these comics are one, when Moomin invites a bunch of guests into his house and then he gets fed up because he can't say no to them, so he has to like sleep outside because there's no space for him. And secondly, when Moomin is kind of trying to find his identity and Sniff suggests that he should be artistic and puts like a beret on his head, and Moomin gets so emo in this beret that he just walks off a cliff. Also, I love that the way Snufkin is introduced into the comic is just him accidentally being in the same tree as Sniff and Moomin, and his first line is just, "Hi, my name is Snufkin, who's gonna start a bank?" Like, what? Also, honorable mention, these comics are the origins of the iconic Moomin bending over picture, which it sounds really bad, but it's actually like really goofy and sweet, because when he like bends over, he just turns into a big ball with feet and a tail, and it's really funny. Anyway, enough of my rambling. Let's move on to the next part. Now, the next part I'm going to talk about is other media, which obviously is kind of a broad term. It includes things like movies, series, plays, and games. And I don't necessarily think this part is going to be that long, but it sure has a lot of content. So I'm just kind of going to breeze through them because there's so much Moomin stuff all over the world. It's wonderful, but also it was hard to research. So first of all, we're going to talk about the Moomin movies. Now, there have been several Moomin movies made throughout the years. The oldest one I can find, which doesn't mean it's the oldest one, but it's the oldest one I can find, is Moomintroll and the Comet, The Way Home, which is a Soviet production from 1978. I couldn't find much about it, but I put the little information that could be gathered on the Russian Wikipedia for the film into Google Translate, and it resulted in this. Moomintroll and Comet, The Way Home, is a 1978 Soviet puppet cartoon directed by Nina Shurina based on the fairy tale Moomintroll and the Comet by Tove Jansson, the last of 3 cartoons in the popular Moomin cartoon series. Now, I'm sorry to Nina, whoever you are, girl. I'm sorry I butchered your name. In 2008, a film called The Moomintroll's Dangerous Midsummer was made. It is a puppet movie from Finland and is based on the book Midsummer Madness by Tove Jansson. The movie is also a rework of 12 episodes from the Polish TV series The Moomintrolls. Now, this movie is also followed by other puppet Moomin movies down the line, like, for example, Moomins and the Comet Chase, released in 2010, that I actually remember watching in school in like 1st or 2nd grade or something. Now, I think the newest Moomin movie that exists is Moomins on the Riviera, which is a French-Finnish production from 2014. It is based on a comic strip by Tove Jansson, and the plot follows the Moomin family as they visit the fancy Riviera and encounter the cultural clashes that come with it. I thought it was really fun that they made a movie based on one of the comic strips, because, again, usually Moomin-related stuff is usually related to the books, so it's interesting to see. Now we're going to talk about some of the plays made about the Moomin family and the Moomin universe. Now, through the years, there have been many Moomin plays around the world. The first Moomin play was Comet in Moominland, which premiered in Helsinki, Finland in 1949. It was originally played in Swedish, but was also performed in Finnish. Now, Tove Jansson wrote the script for this play, and it was directed by Vivica Bandler, her then lover. The second play, Troll i kulisserna, based on Moominsummer Madness, ran in 1958. This one became big and was also directed by Vivica. There are also many plays that have recently run or are currently running, many of them puppet shows. For example, in 2017, the puppet play Moominsummer Madness ran in Tokyo, Japan, and it was actually renewed several times due to popularity. Other examples I could find are The Invisible Child in Espoo, Finland, that ran in November 2024, Christmas Comes to Moominvalley, that is currently running in London, UK, and The Fir Tree, that ran in Stockholm, Sweden from 2021 to 2022. I'm kind of pissed that I missed that one, honestly. Anyway, let's move on to the games. Now, in this modern digital age, there have been several Moomin games made, some for mobile and some for computer or consoles. The very first Moomin game made for PC was released in 1995 and was called Moominpappa. I'm so sorry, please don't kill me. It is available in Swedish and English. This is the first game out of many, and I won't list them all, but just know there's many of the sort. In 1995, a Moomin game was made for Sega. The goal of the game was to teach Japanese kids English. The game was only ever made in Japanese. In 2000, a Moomin game was made for the Game Boy console. The game is called Moomin's Tale and is a puzzle game. From 2007 to 2009, there were several games designed for the Nintendo DS called The Great Autumn Party, The Mysterious Howling, and Moomintani no Okurimono. Girl, the whole world is gonna kill me. Anyway, the first 2 games were released pretty much worldwide with several different languages. Meanwhile, the third one was only released in Japanese and Chinese. Now, several PC games were made throughout the 2010s. For example, Moomin Welcome to Moominvalley by Poppin Games that came out in 2015. It's a farming simulator where you can build your own Moominvalley. There have also been games developed for iOS and Android like Moomin Quest in 2016 that is available worldwide, and Moomin Move in 2018 that is currently only available in Japan. One of the newer Moomin games is Snufkin Melody of Moominvalley that released in March 2024. Now I've actually played this one, and I follow the development of the game ever since it was announced, and I loved it. I'm not gonna lie, it was really cozy to play. It's rather short, but it's very beautiful and adorable, and I think it really captures the Moomin feeling, you know? Like just kind of walking around and doing small missions and going on adventures. Like it really has that nice cozy feeling. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. It's available on Switch, Xbox, PS5, and Steam on PC. And it has actually recently gotten a DLC, which I'm very excited to try. Recently, there's also been a Moomin collab for the MMO game Sky, which I don't know much about it, but it looks lovely, so... Anyway, let's move on to Moomin series. So, series that have been made for TV and DVD and stuff throughout the years. Now, there have been lots of series through the years, many of them animated. The first ever TV series about the Moomins was the German series
Die Moominfamilie.
There you go, perfect pronunciation. Now, this series was aired in 1959 until 1960. It was played out with puppets, sort of like a puppet play, except, you know, it was recorded. Now, one of the live-action ones was called Moominvalley and served as a Christmas calendar in Sweden in 1973. Now, for a little context about advent calendars, for those who don't know, usually you see advent calendars in the forms of boxes with candy or presents inside, with like little doors that count down to Christmas. But in Sweden, this has kind of been translated onto TV, so we have these advent calendars where it's a series and a episode is released every day of December up until the 24th, which is when we celebrate Christmas. Now, one of these are made and aired on TV every year. So in 1973, the advent calendar was Moomin themed. Now, in my opinion, this calendar is kind of terrifying. My mom watched it as a kid, and she kind of describes how she hated it. I'm especially creeped out by the hands just sticking out of the costume. I don't understand why they aren't covered up. But, anyway. The second ever made Moomin animation was Japanese, and aired from 1969 until 1970. It was called Moomin, and wasn't approved by Tove Jansson. Now, probably because of this, it differentiated hugely from her original story, leaving the child-friendly themes behind and incorporated alcohol and violence. Because of this, it was never translated to other languages and shown in other countries. The second Japanese animation was called Shin Moomin. It was released in 1972, and this time it was given international distribution rights by Tove Jansson. So this time it was way more child-friendly, although it still contained some differences, like the characters' appearances. And I found this really interesting. Like, for example, Snork Maiden's hair is pink. The Moomin family varies in color. Moominpappa and Moominmamma are dark brown, but Moomin isn't for some reason. And Mimble, Little Mai's older sister, has green hair. Now, probably the most commonly known Moomin series is Moomin, which is a Dutch-Japanese anime series that aired in Tokyo from 1990 until 1991. This series was a global hit and incorporated a lot of the original stories from Tove Jansson's books and comic strips. It also had some new storylines and character interpretations. Now, personally, I love this series. I think it's beautifully animated with gorgeous backgrounds and scenes. I think the Moomin characters are all so cute. This is definitely like the version of the Moomins where I think everyone is the cutest they've ever been. However, there are some flaws that I'm going to point out because, you know, kill your darlings and everything. And like, yeah, this is definitely gonna be me just nerding out for a moment, so bear with me. Some of the details of the original Moomin stories are ignored, such as the fact that little Mai and Snufkin are half siblings. At least I think they ignored that detail, considering they never mention it, and little Mai flirts with Snufkin, which, if we go by the book's logic, that is like literal incest. And even ignoring the fact that they're siblings, I feel like little Mai isn't at all the kind to flirt, especially not with Snufkin out of all people. Like, I don't know, I just personally didn't like that choice. Some other differences that exist but that aren't really flaws, but just differences, are that little Mai is a part of the series way earlier than in the books, where she only appears in later volumes. I don't have anything against this. I love my girl, so her being included just makes me happy. Also, Snufkin doesn't smoke a pipe, but I mean, that's probably because it's supposed to be, a bit more child-friendly and in the 90s. And I don't know, I just think smoking a pipe is more controversial in like the 90s children's landscape and than it was back in like the 50s. Also, something that doesn't appear in the books that appears in the 90s animated series is Alicia and her grandmother, the witch. Now, these two characters are basically made for the series. They were specifically created for the series. And I find that interesting. Another difference I noticed is that Snork is portrayed as an inventor and as very fixated on flying specifically, which isn't really the case in the books, where he's merely a minor character. Now, another series that I of course have to bring up is the newest addition to the History of Moomin series, and that is of course Moominvalley, a 3D animated series originally airing in 2019 and recently finishing with its 4th season in 2024. The series is produced by the Finnish production company Gutsy Animations in collaboration with Weil I don't know how to pronounce it, Sky and Viaplay in the new 4th season. Now, because this series was dubbed into many languages, English especially, this series really pushed the Moomin franchise from childhood Nordic and Japanese nostalgia into a global phenomenon that probably resulted in you watching this video right now. Now, I will talk more in the next section about what the fandomization, quote-unquote, has done to the view of this franchise, but to summarize, this new series spread the interest of Moomin further than anyone had probably thought it would. Now, the 3D series contains a bunch of amazing voices, both in the English and Finnish, Swedish cast, as well as other languages, I'm sure, and several songs by well-known artists such as Dodie and Cavetown. This series is like the 90s series, based on the stories of the books, but also go beyond that and really expand the stories and characters. Overall, I love it. It's cozy, beautiful, and although I will always prefer 2D animation personally, the style is very pretty and they make Moomin look so soft. I feel like the plot follows the original stories well, while still adding its own charm in the process. I love some of the additions, like working more on relations between characters, like little Mai's respect for Moomin Mama and Moomin's friendship with Snufkin and stuff. I do, however, have opinions about this one as well. Moominvalley is clearly very geared towards kids, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I feel like it has removed some of the edge that is like present in the books. For example, my favorite character is, as previously mentioned, little Mai, and in the books she is loyal to her friends and stand by those she likes. However, in Moominvalley, I feel they've made her nicer. Like, she's a mean queen, and I like her that way. An example of this can be seen in a scene where little Mai encounters a squirrel that nearly dies in the winter cold, and she cries over it and befriends it. In the books, it's Moomin who discovers the squirrel and cries, and little Mai makes fun of him for it and tells him that she's going to make a scarf out of his tail or something like that. And that is like one of my favorite moments of hers. Like, she's so mean and it's just funny. I'm probably just picky because she's my favorite, but still, that's just like a minor thing. Another thing though I want to add, this is like irrelevant and probably not interesting to you guys at all, but it takes so long for this series to be available in Sweden. Like, we can't watch Sky here, or at least we couldn't the last time I checked. And so we have to wait like a year or longer from when a season is produced. So I still haven't been able to watch season 4, and I have no idea when I will be able to, and it freaks me out. Oh my god, because I know there's like some really heartwarming, fun moments in season 4, so I'm like, I'm like raging. But yeah, rant over. I hope this section has been at least a little cohesive. I feel like I've ranted a lot and kind of gone off on side quests this entire section, but yeah, I hope it made sense. Also, sorry if this part echoes a bit. I'm in another place because this is kind of an add-on, but I also want to mention that there's a bunch of Moomin merch as part of, you know, the other media section, because I didn't really know where else to put this. But yeah, just letting you know, there's a bunch of Moomin merch. Everything from cutlery to candles to plushies to stickers to books, you know, you name it. And I mean, that's also a form of media. And I myself own a pretty big Moomin collection. I don't think it's that big in terms of collector's items, but you know, I have a bunch of stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to touch upon that because I realized that I forgot to put that anywhere in this video for some reason. The next section we're going to be talking about is modern fandomization and shipping. Now, I have to start this section by saying that in late 2019, a virus started spreading. And in early 2020, big parts of the world were on lockdown because of it. I'm sure we all have wonderful lockdown memories from this time. Now, for a lot of people, being isolated in the house was a challenge, made all the more prominent by the looming threat of the virus and the lives it took. However, where there's darkness, there's light. Although the pandemic was a challenging time for most people, for some, especially preteens and teens, it offered a unique opportunity to explore self-expression and identity in the comfort of their homes. Since many people couldn't meet eye to eye, everyone's social presence was on the internet. This created many online communities around fashion styles, aesthetics, fandoms, and more. One of the big fandoms during this time, especially among preteens and teens, was Moominvalley. Now, as we know, it released very conveniently in 2019 and really picked up in 2020 when its second season released at the height of the pandemic. Moomin pretty much went from a semi-famous franchise, mainly being popular in the Nordic countries, the UK and Japan, to a global hit with many fans joining in from the US. And I must say, as a Nordic kid that grew up with Moomin, in a society where Moomin is deeply rooted and well-known franchise, it was a little jarring seeing it being thrust into the limelight like it did. Like, I never thought I would see a Moomin fandom. For comparison, it's almost like Charlie and Lola or like Winnie the Pooh suddenly developed a devoted fandom with headcanons and shipping and stuff. Like, I don't know, it was just kind of unexpected and strange at first. But I loved it. It gave me a safe space and a new special interest during the pandemic, and that interest and love has never left, which is why I'm very thankful for the global spread of this franchise and the new Moomin series. However, despite all the positives, there will always be negatives and controversies, I guess. So the first thing I wanted to talk about within this section is new interpretations of characters. Now, I've already gone over some of the new canon interpretations of characters that appeared through the Moominvalley series, but there were also some new ones through the fandom, so like fanon things, or like, you know, headcanons and stuff. A disclaimer though, I'm basing all of this from my own memories from nearly 5 years ago now, so some things might not be 100% accurate. I wasn't able to gather too many TikToks regarding Moomin, so my references are basically my memory and a select few TikToks, so yeah, do with that as you will. But something I seem to remember as very prominent within the fandom when it first emerged was this obsession with Snufkin and his father, the Jockster. Now, at the time where the fandom emerged, Jockster wasn't yet in the new Moominvalley series. I know he's in the 4th season, spoiler alert. However, he was in the 90s anime that everyone was obsessing over, so that's where people got this obsession from. Now, it seems that because of the books and Snufkin being portrayed a little more animal-like there, and his father also being portrayed like almost a little bit like a cat, the fandom interpretation of Snufkin's personality grew based on that. And don't get me wrong, I love headcanons, and I love seeing people's interpretations of characters, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't disagree with like the fanon version of Snufkin. I can't speak a lot about his father because his father just isn't in the series that much, and I don't care that much about him personally, so but I can speak on Snufkin, and my experience with the fandom's characterization of him is that people keep saying that he's so feral and crazy and like animal-like, you know? And I just don't agree with that. I never agreed with it, not back then and not now. Like, to me, Snufkin isn't feral at all. Like, sure, in the books he can be a bit more animal-like, but someone being like anthropomorphic or animal-inspired doesn't necessarily equate them with being feral, or at least not in the way that the fandom used the word. In my experience, the fandom used the word feral to kind of describe someone who's a little crazy, like who do like a bunch of crazy stuff and like is adventurous and random, you know? And while I do think that Snufkin is very adventurous and that he does crazy things sometimes, I would not describe him as feral at all. He's usually very calm and collected and seldom gets excited about stuff, and I just feel like that's kind of the opposite of feral. I feel like people stuck to the "let's fill Moominvalley with crime" quote that was in the 90s Moomin animation, and then just kind of ran with it. But I think that's like one of the only instances where he actually says something crazy, you know? And honestly, it's not that crazy, you know? I'm pretty sure he was like joking because he doesn't like rules and stuff. But I think this fandom interpretation of Snufkin largely comes from his English voice actor in the 90s anime. And this might be reading into something that isn't that important, so I'm sorry if this section is just not interesting right now, but in the 90s anime, his voice actors are very different in the Swedish-Finnish version and the English version. I can't really speak for any other versions because I haven't watched any other versions, but in the English one, he's way more energetic. I'll show you 2 clips of the same scene, one in Swedish and one in English for comparison.
There it is. It's caught on a branch in the middle.
Den har fastnat I grenarna där borta.
Anyway, sorry I went in a little hard there. I don't know, it's just, I feel like this video, a lot of the takes I have and like a lot of the facts I present is kind of intermingled with what I think, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm just a huge fan, so I tend to have opinions, and I tend to express them. Now, other than the fandom's take on Snufkin and Jockster, I agree with most of the fandom's takes on the characters. I mean, I would be lying if I said I didn't love seeing these childhood characters be examined with such care and such love by so many new people, and to see fan art and edits and such, appreciating the art and story and the very interesting world of the Moomins. But I bet you're wondering when I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. We've gone through most iterations of Moomin now. We've gone through the character descriptions and background of the creator. And if you're still here, I just want to take a little moment to thank you so much. This is something that I've worked on for several months and I'm very proud to be presenting. So thank you so much for sticking around. But anyway, here it is. I simply could not mention this fandom without addressing it. Shipping. Yes, of course, shipping. It's a staple in every single fandom. Where there is a fandom, there is at least one ship that half of the fandom is obsessing over. It's like there's basically no exceptions to this rule. And in this fandom, one of the most popular ships just happens to be Moomin and Snufkin. And look, I get it. I really do. For me, again, because I grew up with this, it was kind of a shock at first to see people ship them, just because they're not technically canon in the Moomin universe, and again, because it was like a childhood show, I had never thought of it in like a fandom context, you know, so it was just kind of jarring to see this very fandom behavior of shipping within this Moomin franchise, you know. But a lot of people shipped Snufkin and Moomin specifically because of their very close friendship and its close resemblance to a romantic relationship, with Moomin waiting impatiently on Snufkin each spring, which, you know, kind of romantic. But another reason why people are shipping Moomin and Snufkin are also because of who they are based off of. Now, Moomin is, as previously mentioned, based on Tove herself, and Snufkin is based on her ex-lover Atos. Because of Tove's relationship with Atos in real life, a lot of people like to think that it would be the same for Moomin and Snufkin. And I mean, personally, I ship it. I'm not even gonna lie, like, I think they're so incredibly cute together. And it's just like a lighthearted ship that would be born out of friendship, which I love. However, I must say, every time there's a headcanon ship, especially when it's MLM or, you know, men loving men, there tends to be hatred sent towards the so often occurring female love interest. And in this case, it's Snork Maiden. Now, I'm not saying that because there is a pre-existing love interest for one of the characters you're shipping, that doesn't mean that you can't ship, you know, something else. I mean, ship whatever you want as long as it's, you know, legal. However, there is a definite problem in many fandoms where the female love interest kind of gets in the way for this other, usually gay ship. And because of that, the female love interest, who is usually completely innocent and hasn't done anything wrong, is just kind of either shoved to the side and ignored or straight up like hated on. And I don't like it. I feel like it has definitely like misogynistic undertones, especially considering that it's usually women getting pushed to the side in favor of a male on male, no. MLM relationship. And, you know, I don't know, usually it just kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth, you know? And I haven't experienced that the Moomin fandom is super mean to Snork Maiden. I mean, there's definitely a lot of people who like her, but I did also see her get kind of villainized in fanfiction and fan art and stuff like that back in 2020 when this all blew up. Like, people would call her annoying and just kind of make her really mean when she really isn't mean. So I don't know, I just wanted to bring that up because it kind of irked me. But anyway, so what is my opinion on Moomin and Snork Maiden's relationship, considering I do ship Snufkin and Moomin? Well, I gotta say, I do ship Moomin and Snork Maiden as well. Now, in my opinion, and this might not be agreed upon by others, but in my opinion, Snorkmaiden's relationship with Moomin is depicted as childishly romantic from the beginning. Both Moomin and Snorkmaiden clearly feel strongly for each other from the very start throughout the books, but nothing ever, happens. Like, they give each other gifts and snuggle and stuff, but they never kiss. Like, there's a general lack of kissing in the franchise overall, so that might be why. But if you were to ask me if I had a headcanon surrounding these ships, yes, I do. So in my headcanon, in my mind, I feel like at the beginning of the story, they're all younger, they're all children, and Moomin falls in love or like has a crush on Snorkmaiden, and she has a crush on him, and they're like boyfriend girlfriend, kind of in the sense that you are in like first and second grade, like on and off, But as the story progresses and they all grow up slightly, Snufkin and Moomin catch feelings for each other instead. That's my headcanon. And, they're all still friends throughout all of this. Yeah, that's my personal little headcanon. But to circle back to the canon, I personally feel that it is quite clear that Tove considered Moomin and Snorkmaiden to be in a relationship, and I think it's kind of silly for anyone to deny that or completely ignore Snorkmaiden altogether. Like, she's very sweet and passionate, and she does not deserve to be pushed to the side like that. But anyway, I went a bit of course. I had a long rant. I'm sorry. It's definitely not the first time. Other ships that were popular during this time was Jockster and Mimble, which, are Snufkin's parents. I mean, we know that they got together at least once, and so people like to speculate how that relationship worked out, since neither of them are major characters in the series, and so we don't really get to see their relationship up close. So I thought it was really nice to see people kind of speculate on how their relationship might have been. Another ship that I don't think was that big, but I did see, was people shipping Snorkmaiden and Little Mai. I think this ship is cute and harmless, but I don't know, personally, it's not for me. I think mainly just because I don't feel like Little Mai would date anyone, like, ever. I don't know. That might just be my perception of her. But, yeah, let me know what you ship and what you think about this, this mess. And that brings us to the next and the last section, the end. The Moomin franchise is loved and huge, more widespread today than it has ever been before. It's safe to say that Tove created a legacy for herself when she wrote the books, a legacy that I and many others are so thankful for and appreciate so much. From the books to the TV series, games, and merch, there's so much to take in and enjoy. It's a franchise that is very near and dear to the Nordic countries, especially Finland, where it's from, and it will always be just that. Now, before this video ends, I'd like to give you a movie tip. There is actually a movie about Tove Jansson called Tove. It is a Finland-Swedish production, and it is a dramatization of Tove's early life as an artist. Obviously, when it comes to movies about real-life people, you can never know what the people in question would think of it or how accurate it really is to real life, but I would still recommend it a lot. I watched it when it came out, and I loved it. Definitely give it a watch if you haven't. I'll put a link in the description if you want to watch the trailer. Anyway, before I leave, I'll tell you about some final thoughts that I have. I loved making this video. Like, I know I've said it before, but it was so much fun. To yap about my interests is one of my favorite things, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. And so this was nothing but a joy. Moomin is so important to me, both as a Nordic person who grew up with it, but also as a queer woman. I love seeing myself get represented in media, whether it is through art or the artists themselves. The Moomin franchise has made me feel seen in a way few things have, and I'll forever be grateful for that. Now, links with credits and my socials and all of the sort like that can be found in the description. So, thank you so much for watching. Good luck to you and have a great life.